Okay. All right, great. I think we're all here, so let's we'll get started in 5 seconds. Allow Westborough TV to clear the blue screen. Good evening and welcome to the July 28th meeting of the Westborough Board of Selectmen. I'm your chair, Shelby Marshall. And before we get started and read the agenda, I will go ahead and read the governor's orders that we've become all very comfortable with hearing. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Westborough Board of Selectmen will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information in the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and or parties with a right and or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the Town of Westborough's website at town.westborough.ma.us. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so in the following manner: on Westborough TV, and that will be televised on Verizon Channel 28 and Charter 192. You can also live stream it through Westborough TV. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on the Town of Westborough's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. And with that, I will go through our agenda tonight. So we'll have approval of meeting minutes for June 23rd. We have a request to appoint Daniel Schur as alternate to CMRCP. We have a discussion vote regarding a request for letter of support and authorization to submit a Massworks grant application for the intersection of Flanders Road and West Park Drive. We have a presentation regarding the history of our town seal. We'll have a discussion vote on next steps related to changing the town seal. We'll have a presentation by Eversource regarding an update on the Worcester Feedline improvement project. We'll have another presentation by Eversource regarding gas leaks in Westborough. At 6:50, we'll talk about our committee handbook. We'll then move to our annual reappointments to town boards and committees. We'll have a discussion vote regarding the request for the board to sign a petition referred to as municipal support for generating new revenue from well-resourced places. And Selectman Hashmi will present that. Discussion vote to execute purchase and sale. Christy, are we doing 30 Belknap or no? No. Okay, we're going to pass over item number 11 for those of you referring to the agenda at this time. Discussion vote to execute Central Massachusetts Regional Stormwater Coalition fiscal year 2021 to 2025 intermunicipal agreement. A discussion vote to amend membership of Community Preservation Act Exploratory Committee. We'll have our town manager report. We'll have issues and correspondence from the selectmen, and we will have an executive session to consider purchase, sale, lease, or value of real estate at 31 to 33 Eli Whitney Street and 30 Belknap Street. And before we move into our first agenda item, I do want to just thank the public for input that's been provided on how the meetings are going so far with me as chair. It's always a transition time. Every chair sort of has his or her own kind of flavor in how they run the meetings. But one of the things I've learned early on, and already admitting a mistake, is that sometimes we tend to allow conversation and go over in meeting time for the benefit of conversation, but that really puts everyone else at a disadvantage that's waiting on the agenda. So I'm going to be better at managing our time, and that may result in that will result in sticking to the times that we've allotted on the agenda. And if we have to continue a discussion at a later meeting, we'll do so. So just want, out of respect for all of our folks, we're here by choice. Our guests are often waiting until late in the night to jump in for their part. So we want to be respectful of everyone's time. So with that, we'll move into our first agenda item of June 23rd minutes. Do I have a motion?
I'll move the approval of the June 23rd, 2020 Board of Selectmen meeting minutes.
Second, Emery.
Okay, any discussion from the board?
Nope.
I did have, I apologize, I wasn't able to email Sela in time. There were a couple of really minor changes. Top of page 3, first bullet, it says, if the board would be to move forward. I think it just needs to read, if the board were to move forward. And that was, I think that the third bullet I was going to suggest on that same page, I was going to suggest some changes to kind of the content that was there, but I think for all intents and purposes, it really captured a pretty diverse discussion that we had, the way it's written. So thank you, Sela, for capturing all of the content of that discussion. So with that minor change, if we don't mind to amend the motion. Okay, great.
No problem.
All right, great. So I'll call for a roll call vote. Selectman Edinburgh?
Edinburgh, yes.
Selectman Emery?
Emery, yes.
Selectman Johnson?
Johnson, yes.
Selectman Hashmi?
Yes.
Okay, and Selectman Marshall, yes, 500, 5 being present. Great. Move on to our next agenda item. Christy, do you want to present this? Oop,
You're on mute.
I mute. There you go.
Really good presentation. We had a resident reach out who's interested in being the CMRPC, so the Central Mass Planning Commission alternate, and it's someone who has, prior to living in Westborough, who actually had served on the CMRPC board for the town of Oxford. So he's reached out and is interested in being appointed.
Great. Do I have a motion?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
may I?
Yes.
So I move to appoint Daniel Short as the alternate to the Central Massachusetts Regional Planning Commission for a term to expire June 30th, 2021.
I
I'll
will
second that. I'll let Alan second that.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Ian.
You're welcome.
Any comments or discussion?
No, this looks like a great appointment. And just as a side note, Christy, if you or Sheila, if you have his contact information, can you send it to me? Because there's a upcoming meeting that's coming up that he may be interested in.
Yeah, so it is in the packet at the bottom of
Okay.
his letter of interest.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Okay, well, I do also want to echo the board's thanks and the community's thanks for individuals that continue to step up, like Mr. Schur, and lend their expertise and interest. So with that, we have a motion and a second. Selectman Edinburgh?
Edinburgh, yes.
Selectman Emery?
Emery, yes.
Selectman Johnson?
Johnson, yes.
Selectman Hashmi?
Yes.
And Selectman Marshall, yes. 500, 5 being present. Thank you very much. Okay, great. We're moving into our next agenda item, which is a request for letter of support and authorization for the Massworks grant. Christy? Or Jim, I'm sorry.
Jim Robbins, the town planner, is on the call, and he's been working on this, so you can present, Jim.
Great. Hi, Jim. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Yes, thank you very much for having me. I know that you're all aware of this project. Joining me this evening, I have Mark Varro of Caruth Capital, Dan Feeney of Beals and Thomas, and Scott Thornton from Vanessa Associates. They're going to also participate in this presentation. I'm going to give you a very, very brief overview. If you allow Dan to share his screen with you, I had a simple PowerPoint.
Well,
While he-
okay. Should we be able to do that, Alan?
Yes, you should. Just along the bottom, there's an icon that says present now. And then you can select the application or the window. It'll share a screen.
There is just a bit of a delay, so give it a second.
While he's doing that, this is no surprise to the board. Several months ago, I was in front of the board when we were in town hall prior to the COVID virus, and I talked about this project. This is very exciting to extend the end of West Park Drive to Flanders Road so that we can relieve congestion at the intersection of Research Drive and Connector Road. As you know, that signal right now is congested in both morning and evening commute time. The extension of the subdivision road is preliminarily approved by the planning board. The project will now move to its final design phase, and that's called the definitive phase, at which time we're going to apply for the Massworks grant in the month of August, at the end of August, for the money to pay for the construction of the intersection, the possibility of them paying for the design, of course, the hardware, which is the signal itself, and the signal timing mechanism, which will be on the side of the road, as well as administration of the grant. We're very much looking forward to this. Can we share the screen?
Scott, are you having difficulty on do you see the present now? Bottom right, I think it is, of most, when it pops up there at the bottom.
I think it's Dan that's trying to share the
Oh,
screen.
Dan, I'm sorry.
So in the interest of time, so that we don't have dead air here, I'll tell you a little bit about the Massworks grant program. The project must support economic development. It must improve infrastructure, create jobs, support local and regional land use and development goals, and be consistent with both local and regional economic development plans. Eligible uses of the grant include pre-construction design and engineering, direct construction and construction materials, project administration. So how does this project satisfy the Massworks program? Well, first of all, we improve access, as I've said previously. The new signalized intersection will relieve congestion at the Connector Road Research Drive intersection, which currently functions at a level of service D, approaching a level of service failure. It relieves, here we go. Okay, let's move to the second slide. Dan, that would be great. So that's where I am right now. So the new intersection would improve and relieve congestion at the Connector Road and Research Drive intersection. It relieves congestion at the Route 9 and 495 interchange, which, as you all know, is one of the top congested intersections in the entire Commonwealth. It's actually at the top of the list of what they call traffic nightmares for the state. So people leaving West Park Drive would now have another option to go east rather than just Route 9. So that should reduce the number of trips going through that intersection. The traffic signal will improve safety on Flanders Road. If you've ever driven on Flanders Road during peak hours, you know that the speeds are quite high. People are moving back and forth between the office parks, trying to get up to the Connector and Research Drive intersection. It relieves the current line of sight issue that would exist at the intersection of Flanders Road with the new West Park Drive road, and it improves turning movements. Obviously, the signal will allow people to enter West Park Drive, but it'll also provide better slow turning movements for those on Flanders Road. West Park Drive extension will provide access and enhance improvements for pedestrians and bikers. There'll be a trail connection to the BWAT, which is the Boston-Worcester Airline Trail. There'll be pedestrian sidewalks along West Park Drive extension, and a traffic signal phase for pedestrian crossing to cross Flanders Road. Next slide, last slide. So the project will encourage job creation. Improved access makes West Park Drive and the entire east side of the town more attractive to business location. We all know about Olympus and their second phase called Olympus Phase 2. They want to expand the site. Having a connection to Flanders Road will improve that chance. Also, Partners Healthcare, and as we know, the EMC Dell campus, which was approved over a decade ago, is down the street. Better access for them to head eastbound coming out of Crystal Pond Road onto Flanders Road will enhance the desirability of that vacant subdivision. It supports the goals of the economic development of our master plan. As you know, we want to promote opportunities for responsible economic development. That means relieving congestion, and reducing in congestion and improving circulation while improving access for walkers and bikers. And lastly, it supports the goals of the regional planning efforts, the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, which was kicked off a couple years ago by CMRPC and the City of Worcester, the I-495 Compact, and Central Mass Regional Planning Commission Plan for Regional Economic Development. I'd like to turn it over now to Mark Farrow from Caruth Capital. You'll need your mic, Mark.
And Mark, as you're bringing that up, Dan, if there's any chance of making that larger on the screen, it's so we can see it just by percent. Thank you very much. Thanks, Dan.
All set?
Yep.
Okay, well, thank you for having us. Mark Farrow, Caruth Capital, 116 Flanders Road, Westborough. As far as Caruth is the owner of Westborough Office Park, which is West Park Drive, and we also own 200 Freiburg Parkway, which is in the Westborough Business Park, as well as developable land in both the Westborough Business and Westborough Office Park. We have 4 reasons for wanting to extend West Park Drive to Flanders Road. And the number 1 reason is accessibility. We want to increase the accessibility to the park for cars, pedestrians, and bikes. Right now, I just Googled the distance between 2 neighboring properties, 134 Flanders Road and 2200 West Park Drive. These buildings are 700 feet apart, yet to go from one building to the other, you have to travel 2.8 miles through a busy intersection. So it's kind of crazy for, you know, our tenants and Westborough residents that live in Westborough, Ashland, Southborough, Hopkinton. They, you know, if they're heading down Flanders Road, they have to go through all this intersection, and they're also blocking the businesses in the area that want to exit. You know, other tenants of Westborough Office Park, BJ's, Freiburg Parkway, where One Research comes out, and eventually Olympus. You know, this March, hopefully, and any additional land. I know. You know, eClinical someday is going to grow into 900 West Park Drive. So there's going to be more traffic there. And as Jim mentioned, we have Olympus Phase 2, Partners Healthcare, and then additional land that we own in Westborough Office Park that's right at the end of the West Park Drive, 2100 and 2300 West Park Drive, you know, 2.8 miles away from Flanders Road, even though they're right there. So as far as accessibility, we've dealt with cars. We're going to, by extending this road to Flanders Road, we're going to increase accessibility for pedestrians and bicycles. As Jim mentioned, we are going to connect both Westborough Office Park and Westborough Business Park to the B Wall Trail. And within Westborough Office Park, what you see on the screen here in orange are going to be the multi-use paths that we're going to put into West Park Drive. And at the bottom where it intersects the B Wall Trail, so you have the red dash line there, and then the B Wall Trail and the West Park Drive extension are going to be adjacent to one another, separated by a small medium to the light on Flanders Road. So the pedestrians can bike to work, walk to work. Another reason we're doing this, reason number 2, is the amenities. We currently have trails, and we would like to expand what we have at Westborough Office Park and Business Park, you know, especially Westborough Office Park. one of the marketing advantages we have there is such a nice park, given its park atmosphere, the availability of trails, and having the availability of the beat wall trail for both walking and bicycling, and is a great amenity. It provides direct access to the Walkup Reservation Sunbury Valley trustees. And then as far as improving traffic, as Jim had mentioned, we're going to improve, having this light would improve traffic for both the region and the location. It doesn't make sense to have all these people travel through the Route 9 intersection when they're not, they have no intention of exiting onto Route 9 or 495. Also, this light is going to stop traffic occasionally. That's going to allow businesses and residences entering into Flanders Road. It'll give them a break, especially if and when EMC land gets developed. There's going to be more traffic there, and especially in the evening around 5:30, it takes a while sometimes for people to take a left turn in either direction on Flanders Road because of the traffic. By having this light provide that stop occasionally, you're going to allow the traffic to go through. And then finally, what's very important to us is just the economic development. The Westborough Office Park is currently 25% vacant. And if you take a look at the availability, it's over 30%. Availability means, the tenant's paying rent, but they've already moved out. Their lease is up in a few months, and they've closed up shop. And what we want, because of the amenities and the traffic improvement and the access to Flanders Road, will allow us not only to reduce our vacancy, knock on wood, and also the development of the vacant land that's there, that's already approved. We want Olympus to exercise their option for phase 2. We want partners to build the clinic there, and we would like to develop 2100 and 2300 West Park Drive. By improving the traffic and accessibility and increasing amenities, we think we can do this, and that's why we're here this evening, asking for your approval. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Burrow. Jim, is there anyone else from the team that would like to speak, or?
I have Dan Feeney here, who's going to talk about the actual intersection itself, so you can get a sense of how it will be built. Dan?
All right, everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yep, okay, great, thanks. This plan here is a blow up just of the intersection itself. So Flanders Road running in an east-west direction, and the proposed extension of West Park Drive coming down and intersecting it. So this would be proposed to be a trafficked intersection. There would be a proposed left turn lane for vehicles heading eastbound on Flanders to get into the site. Exiting the West Park Drive extension, there'd be a dedicated left and right turn lane to process the vehicles during the PM peak hour commute. We did consider putting in a right turn lane into the site. The level of service analysis that Vanessa and Associates had done determined it wasn't necessary, and to stay within the existing right-of-way of the town and keep 5-foot shoulders on both sides of the road and line up the roadway so that as we put in this left turn lane coming in the eastbound direction, that the west traffic wouldn't have to jog through here. The right turn lane was eliminated from the design. Again, it still works without the right turn lane. This is the one piece of property in this general area of the site north of Flanders coming up to West Park Drive that Caruth does not control, the 134 Flanders Road property. So the right turn lane was eliminated, but again, the level of service still works out there without a right turn lane. A couple of other just minor notes. The intersection itself is a little bit lengthy. The stop line for the eastbound traffic is back a little bit. The driveways across the street, 129 and 131 Flanders Road, will be part of the signalized control. So they'll be able to exit using the traffic light as well. The proposed extension of the B-Wall trail will come down off the edge of the pavement, separate from the roadway itself to a ramp here. There'll be a crossing to get across Flanders Road. So bicyclists or pedestrians on either side of the road will be able to get onto the B-Wall trail. And again, like I said, there is 5-foot shoulders on both sides of Flanders Road being incorporated into the design to accommodate that pedestrian and bicycle traffic. I think that's the one other thing I'll mention is that the traffic signal does help. There is a vertical curve existing in Flanders Road, and the traffic light will help to improve sight distance, just controlling the speed of vehicles through this section of Flanders Road. The total length of the roadway improvement stretching east to west is approximately 1,300 feet. And again, that's to get the tapers in for the left turn lane and the alignments of the roadway. And we have met with MassDOT preliminarily just to present the plan, and they didn't have any major concerns with it.
Okay, Jim, anyone else from the team before we open up to the board for questions?
I'm just going to ask if Scott had anything he wanted to add. Scott Thornton from Vanessa.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. I don't think we had anything else. Dan really touched on the major points of the plan. There will be full push button pedestrian activation to be able to get pedestrians or bicyclists to cross Flanders Road. So I know that's an important consideration. But in terms of the design, I think that Dan really touched on the points. If there are any other questions.
Okay,
Shelby, it looks like Mark might have another follow-up point.
thank you, Ann. Yes, Mark Fro?
Yes, one other point, based on Vanessa's feedback in the state, originally the multi-use trail terminated on the up above where it says limit of work meets site by others. We had a stop sign there, and that's where the trail ended. And the state and Vanessa said that they wouldn't allow the trail to just end there. And so one of the reasons we eliminated that right turning lane is it really isn't necessary for right turn, but it allowed us to provide to continue the multi-use trail all the way to the crossing. And that's
Yeah, thank you for that. Great. All right, thank you very much for the presentation. Selectman Emery, you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you. I may have mentioned this when we looked at this project once before, and I don't know if it would help the rationale for your grant, Mark and Jim Robbins. But I think it's Miss Tanya's daycare is on the street that's just after the 495 overpass. So people go down Flanders eastbound and turn onto that street to drop off their children. And I've remarked to our police in the past that people who aren't dropping off children there drive very, very quickly the speed limit coming out onto Flanders and coming from Flanders onto that pass-through road. And I think that having that stoplight and the interval of interruption that it gives you is going to make it safer for families carrying children in their cars to that daycare. So I don't know if that's anything that, in terms of enhancement of safety is worth mentioning in your proposal, but I think it's a significant benefit and enhancement to safety in that area.
Thank you, Lee. Any other comments from any of the selectmen? Questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Okay, I'll do the motion.
Great.
I move to authorize the Board of Selectmen chair to provide a letter of support for the project on behalf of the Board of Selectmen, and further to authorize the chair or the town manager to execute the Massworks grant application and all related documents.
Emery, second.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, we'll go for a roll call vote. Selectman Edinburgh.
Edinburgh, yes.
Selectman Emery.
Emery, yes.
Selectman Johnson,
Johnson, yes.
Selectman Hashmi,
Yes.
Selectman Marshall, yes, 5005 being present. I'm very excited about this project. It's a great enhancement to the town for all the reasons mentioned. Thank you for coming on tonight and for all the work that's been done and for being thorough and thoughtful as always.
Thank you to the board. Appreciate it very much. We will work with Christy. Thank you.
Great.
Thanks.
Enjoy your
Thank you.
evening.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Have a good
You
night.
too.
Welcome.
Good night.
Okay, great. We'll move to our next agenda item, which is a presentation by our local history librarian, Dr. Anthony Vaver. I see he is on. Good evening, Dr. Vaver.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Excellent. Just to refresh the board's memory and the public's, we previously had a presentation to the board by a member of the public. We had significant discussion by the board during that time. And we've asked Dr. Vaver to come and present the history of the town seal to the board as a way to further educate the board and the public on what is a town seal, what is the history of the town seal, and sort of how does that relate to present day. We'll talk after his presentation in our next agenda item about next steps as it relates to this particular topic. So Dr. Vaver, you have the floor.
Great, thank you for having me. As Shelby said, I am the local history librarian at the Westborough Public Library, and so I'm here to speak with you about the town seal. And I guess the controversy stems from the fact that Whitney's machine, his cotton gin, greatly increased cotton production in the United States and made the industry so much more profitable than it was before that it ended up preserving and prolonging slavery throughout the American South at a time when slavery was really beginning to wane. So in addressing this issue, I have three aims. So one is to give a brief history of our town seal. Two, to present information about Eli Whitney, his cotton gin, and his relationship to Westborough. And three, to provide some reflections on the purposes and meanings of public symbols like town seals and monuments. And if you permit me, I'm going to read my remarks because I want the words that I use to be precise in talking about this issue.
Please do.
So in 1899, the General Court of Massachusetts passed a law mandating that every city and town in Massachusetts have a seal and that town clerks were responsible for maintaining their custody. Westborough's first town seal began to appear on its annual town report in 1913. The design is fairly generic, although to my eyes, it has kind of an antique charm to it. So I'm going to try to share that with you now so you can, let's see here.
There you go. It's coming on.
Okay, let's see here.
There you go.
Is that, you see the
We
early
do-
town seal here?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay, so that's what the early town seal looks like. And then as part of the celebration of its 250th anniversary in 1967, Westborough decided to change its town seal. According to the commemorative booklet for the celebration, art students from Westborough High School were invited to submit drawings for a new seal design. The anniversary committee ended up selecting 4 drawings to be used as a composite for the official seal. And so let's go to this. Does that, you see the new seal here?
Yes, we do.
Okay. So the 4 drawings are a sketch of the tower on Town Hall, an outline of the map of Westborough proclaiming it the 100th town, a pie crust edge around the seal, and a drawing of Eli Whitney's cotton gin based on his patent. So this is basically, they took 4 ideas from high school students and put them together to form and create this town seal. So the new seal appeared on the front cover of the commemorative booklet for the celebration and was used to create a commemorative coin. On the reverse side of the booklet and the coin is another drawing by a high school art student depicting, quote, an Indian lad in a deep forest setting. The Westborough Center for History and Culture in the Westborough Public Library, we have one of those coins, and I'd be happy to show it to anybody who's interested in it and seeing it once the library is back and opens up again. Am I back? So I don't really, so I'm going to stop presenting just for the moment here.
There you go.
Okay.
Yep.
So that's the basic history of how we got our current seal. So let's turn now to Eli Whitney. Eli Whitney was born in Westborough in 1765 and left the town for good in 1789 at the age of 23 to attend Yale College. After finishing school and moving to Georgia, he received a patent for his cotton gin in 1794. Cotton gins had been around before Whitney's invention, most notably in India, which dominated the world's cotton market well before the American South began producing and exporting cotton. But the particular strain of cotton that grew in the South had fibers that were tightly attached to its seeds, and the Indian cotton gins could not separate the two, and that changed with Whitney's machine. Whereas before, one person could clean about a pound of cotton a day, Whitney's cotton gin increased cotton production by 4,900%. With great profits to be made from a worldwide demand for cotton textiles, this increased production capacity prompted cotton growers in the American South to expand their operations and created increased demand for arable land in the West. Since these growers relied on slaves to cultivate and process their cotton, the institution of slavery greatly expanded as well, and slaves were required to work longer and harder to meet production capacities. Whitney never realized the profits he expected to gain from his invention. Instead of selling cotton gins directly to cotton growers, he and his partner decided to charge farmers to clean their cotton for them, much like grist mills charged to grind corn or wheat. The simplicity of his cotton gin design, however, made it easy to copy. So the two ended up using all of their profits to fight patent infringements, and the company went bankrupt in 1797. Before we move on to my reflections on the purpose of public symbols, I want to share with you an experience that I had while visiting the National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C., which, by the way, was the best museum experience I've ever had. After moving through an exhibit on the history of the Atlantic slave trade, where the dark, crowded, and cramped setting gave the impression of being on a slave ship, I emerged into a large, bright hall devoted to the history of slavery in the United States. At the center of this exhibit hall was a large display of a cotton gin, and surrounding it were other artifacts from the practice of slavery in the U.S., including an early 19th century slave stone auction block from Hagerstown, Maryland. And I can show you the pictures that I took.
Being daring, 2 screen shares and 1 presentation.
That's right. So this is the picture of the cotton gin exhibit, and you could see where it's so large in the room that I really had a hard time fitting it into the screen of my my cell phone. And this is, so off to the side and in various almost like spokes around it were other artifacts, and this is the slave stone auction block, and you could really hear the gasps by people when they would come and take a look at that. It was such a powerful symbol. Okay. In a recent interview in the New York Times, Lonnie Bunch, the former founding director of the National Museum of African American History and Culture, and now the head of the entire Smithsonian Institution, talks about ambiguity. He says, and I quote, "History often teaches us to embrace ambiguity, to understand there aren't simple answers to complex questions, and Americans tend to like simple answers to complex questions. So the challenge is to use history to help the public feel comfortable with nuance and complexity. As both a librarian and a cultural historian, my role is to help people become comfortable with nuance, complexity, and ambiguity. There are many issues at play in the debate and decision to change the design of our current town seal due to its depiction of Eli Whitney's cotton gin. Because the issue is complicated, we must carefully define the terms we were using in the debate and understand their implications. Yet even then, ambiguity will arise. In debates such as this one and others concerning, say, Confederate statues, the term history is often used in a way that implies that because the past happened, that past is etched in stone and cannot be altered or erased. But history is a practice, not a simple chronicling of events, and as such, history never fossilizes in this way. Our picture of the past is always shaped by our ever-evolving perspectives over time. The more we research an event, the more we consider additional contexts, and ironically, the further away we get from having lived under its shadow, the better we are able to understand that event. This new understanding will necessarily change the way we perceive and value that event. We also need to be clear about the purpose of seals, symbols, and monuments. These artistic representations are supposed to be embodiments of who we are, what we value, and what we aspire to be as a community, culture, and society. We put these symbols in public places, on government documents, in parks, on flags, to remind us and to proclaim to others what we together believe we represent. When our society experiences change, as it inevitably does, the symbols that once represented us in the past may no longer adequately do so for any given reason. But we have a social mechanism in place to take care of these situations. We have other public places where such outdated symbols can go: libraries, archives, museums, and other public cultural institutions, so that they can be preserved and given proper context from the standpoint of our newly shared perspective. Yes, seals, symbols, and monuments are historical in the sense that they were created at a particular time and place, and they often involve history because the past shapes who we are today. But strictly speaking, they are not history. By replacing them, we are not erasing history. We are in fact engaging in history. For whatever reason, the people of Westborough in 1967 decided that their current seal no longer represented who they were and needed replacement. In the same way, we today can ask similar questions about whether or not our town seal continues to represent us and our values. The cotton gin displayed so prominently in an exhibit hall devoted to the history of slavery in Washington, D.C. raises many questions. I have two. First, would we as a town be proud if the label for this cotton gin displayed in this context pointed out that the person who designed it grew up in Westborough? And if not, then why would we want to display a prominent picture of this same machine on our town seal? My second question is, since Westborough is not mentioned in the exhibit label, how important is our town's connection to the cotton gin in the first place? At the very least, these are fair questions to ask. When symbols no longer work for the people that they are supposed to represent, it makes sense that they try to replace them. This process, however, can be painful, both for the people who believe that the symbol continues to represent them and for the people who seek to replace it because it makes them feel like outsiders in that community. As painful and difficult as the process of coming to some agreement about the kind of seal we want for our town may be, we will in the end be better off for having the important discussion of who we are and who we want to be. From this perspective, seals, symbols, and monuments are serving their desired purpose because they force us as a society into having these kinds of conversations, sometimes whether we want to have them or not. We use history to tell stories about ourselves. These stories are powerful because they work to define who we think we are. So when these stories go through revision, it can be disorienting. We feel like if we reject the way that these narratives were originally handed down to us, that we are also rejecting our identity, and even worse, judging ourselves for originally holding such views. I understand. Change is hard, but we all experience change throughout our lives, whether we like it or not, and quite often, we come out better for it. As a student of culture and history, I am excited that we are having these kinds of conversations. I encourage people to become curious rather than resistant to new ways of thinking about and seeing the world. Maybe in the end, we as a community will decide that the current seal we have is just fine. But wouldn't it be fun to think about what we might rather see in its place, to put in the work of exploring who we are as a community and thus make our community stronger as a result? We are reevaluating our town seal today because our understanding of Eli Whitney and his cotton gin is more nuanced and consequently much more interesting than it was in 1967. This new narrative tells us a lot more about who we are as a people and gives us the opportunity to reconsider who we want to be. That's what makes history so exciting. It's not really about the past, but about who we want to be in the future. And finally, I would be remiss as a librarian if I did not say that if any of you listening to me today are feeling confused or frustrated about any element of this controversy, the library is here to help. Librarians and I are available to direct you to resources that can help answer your questions, or even help you to ask new ones. Because what makes history so exciting is that we get to keep asking questions. Thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to come and to speak in front of you.
Thank you.
Questions, if anybody has any, or I'll stick around for a little bit here just to be on hand.
Thank you very, very much. Every time you speak, I learn something, and isn't that part of the process? So I do see some hands up from the board. So Lee.
I want to thank you, Anthony. I read your article in the paper and then you expanded on it here. It gives us a wonderful context for going forward. One of the things I took away from it, though, and I don't want to sound like I'm nitpicking, but it sounds as though Eli Whitney did not actually invent the cotton gin. It was already invented and in use in India, but he made a better one. And the one that was better actually contributed to the expansion and elongation of slavery. That's just how I read the facts.
That's correct. That's exactly right.
Thank you, Lee. Syed, you'd like to speak?
Yeah, first I want to thank Dr. Vaver for just a spectacular discussion of the seal, but also what history means. And I also just kind of want to address something that has kept coming up in emails and conversations that people have had with me. And that is this discussion worth having in the middle of a pandemic with everything else that is going on? And my answer to that is, just as symptoms revealed sickness, this discussion has revealed things that we for too long in this town have ignored and dismissed as it couldn't happen here. It is time, I think, to acknowledge that things do happen here. They don't happen in the shadows, but they happen in broad daylight. And there are no consequences to the perpetrators and no justice to the victims. And so, to me, you don't treat sickness by ignoring symptoms. You treat sickness by listening to the symptoms. And this is why, at least in my eyes, this discussion is not just urgent, but necessary. And in 1966, Martin Luther King, was confronted with the charge that his tactics were rousing hatred and unrest, a charge that is being leveled against many people that are fighting racism or raising uncomfortable questions today. And he also used a metaphor of a physician treating cancer to point out the civil rights protests had helped expose a hate-filled cancer of racism that was already there, and thus giving us a chance to treat it. And to me, the discussion, whether we want to admit it or not, the discussion around the town seal has exposed deep fault lines in our town, about the town we were, the town we are, and the town we hope to be. And as Dr. Weber said, the discussion of the seal should give everyone in this town a chance to reflect on its past, but hopefully not tie us to it. Far too many of us, I come from a land where everyone is always looking backward when we should be looking forward toward a vision of Westborough that is yet to be born. And it is our charge, our mission, and our imperative to take this task on, to heal this divide in our town. And we can't escape the consequences of history, but we must seek to find ways of redemption, forgiveness, and find ways to make amends. And that is up to us, that we have to find a way to make this town work for everyone. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Syed. Other selectmen want to add anything to it or comment, questions for Dr. Weber? No? Okay. All right. I'm going to ask Dr. Weber just to stay on while we kind of blend into our next agenda item, which is regarding the next step related to our town seal. So we've talked about a couple pathways forward, I guess, if you will. And ultimately, they end up at two sort of critical juncture points. One would be to have an article on the October, I'll say fall town meeting. I don't want to say October, but the fall town meeting, not knowing when we'll have town meeting. And that would be to put an article before the voters, presumably to have them determine whether or not a change in the seal is warranted. And then a subsequent town meeting, if that were to pass favorably for a change, would be annual town meeting would be to have a designs and ideas presented ultimately for a vote. Christy, did I represent that correctly? I'm seeing you nod. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So between here and there, the board really needs to, in part, determine what that process is going to be, but it really starts with the next steps of fall town meeting. So I'll open it up to the board for comments and discussion.
So,
yes, Ian?
Chair?
Yep, Syed, you'll go after Ian, please. Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, Shelby. Yeah, so I think we talked about this a lot at the earlier meeting, and I think I, for one, was kind of pushing the idea of a kind of public meeting to hear concerns. But I think as I look back on that meeting and the, kind of where it evolved to, it did feel like the board was, well, we didn't take a vote, of the mindset to put this on kind of the next town meeting. So with that, I'm wondering, although I was pushing for this public meeting, the town meeting itself is going to be a public meeting as it is, and people are going to discuss it. And that's really, are we being duplicative, and especially in this time of the COVID pandemic, putting or asking people to come forward twice. To me, I'm thinking that we may not need that. We may just reserve it for the town meeting itself to have that discussion and bring it forward. I guess the one question, and this really goes to Selectman Hashmi's comments, is I do think that from what we've seen so far, there is a lot of interest in this among the residents of town, which I think is great. I think we probably all think that. So the only question I would have is, I think we should move forward with it at the fall town meeting, but if for some reason the fall town meeting is limited to such an extent that we don't think that there's a chance to a full debate, I would just I guess suggest that we may want to wait till we can make sure that we have that full discussion. So I think that from what I know I've personally heard from folks that want to speak to it, is just concerned about whether they will be able to attend that town meeting. But I do think for right now, I think for me, my suggestion would be that we put it as a warrant article from the Board of Selectmen on the October or the fall town meeting warrant, as you said, Chair Marshall. But thank you.
Thank you. Syed.
I agree with that. I agree with Ian completely. I think he's completely on track. I was also, I think, if memory serves, I was also one of the people that wanted a public hearing. But if we're going to have a town meeting is a public hearing, and that is where you get to argue yay or nay. And I think Ian also makes a really good point that if we are unable to hold town meeting first let's put the prior town meeting that we had in perspective. We had that town meeting, and thanks to all the hard work of our moderator, town clerk, and all the other officials, we did not see for 2 weeks after that town meeting, we did not see a rise in infection. So I'm praying, hoping that we can pull that off depending on what the situation is like. And as Ian says, if things are going well and if we are able to hold a town meeting, then that's fine. If not, then we can have, I'm completely with Ian on this.
Thank you, Syed.
Madam Chair?
Yeah, I think Alan was next, Lee.
Okay.
If you don't mind. Thank you.
Yep. No.
I agree with the approach. Certainly as a board, we've received dozens and dozens of emails that have gotten us to this point. I feel that if we were to do even just a public comment period and a public hearing, my sense is that's not going to change or direct the opinion of the board, which seems to have consensus for providing this on town meeting. What we're talking about here today is the board supporting this going to town meeting so that the town can discuss and decide whether or not to move forward. And of course, the board, as with all warrant articles, will have an opportunity to vote in support of the specific warrant article in the future. So I think committing now to have an article on the town meeting warrant is a good idea. And it can certainly something be drafted over the next several weeks, whatever, and give the town the opportunity to discuss, debate, and decide how if and how it wants to move forward.
Thank you, Alan. Lee?
Yes, I agree with everything said so far. And after the town meeting would be a time when obviously we'd be setting up some kind of mechanism to talk about and decide what should be on the seal. And there would be some interim period where a seal wouldn't be developed artistically, but the ideas for what should be on it would be discussed. And it might be that there's a lot of sentiment that something about Eli Whitney should be on it in some fashion, in a new one or not. But that's the time, I think, when we can renew getting people together to really discuss what they think should represent us and have a robust discussion around it then. So I agree with putting it on the warrant and then having more discussion later on.
Great. Ian, you came off mute before I make a comment. Did you want to add something?
Nope, I wanted to go back on mute.
Okay. Okay. So I echo the sentiments of the board. I think that putting this on fall town meeting is the right thing to do. I fully support Ian, what you've said, and that is even if when we have fall town meeting, if the conditions, meaning that of the pandemic, are such that we feel much like we had to have an abbreviated or shortened annual town meeting, if we feel like that is necessary in the best interest of public safety and health, then I think that we need to allow ourselves the opportunity to push this item to a different town meeting. It might be annual, it might be a special town meeting, but some future date, because I do think that it will. It has grabbed the attention of a lot of people, and we want to encourage people to turn out. We want to encourage people to turn out at town meeting. I've been back and forth on, do we do a public comment period? Do we have a public hearing? And really have landed on that is the purpose of town meeting. I would not want folks to participate in a public hearing or a public comment period of some sort. Even those people who have, thought to send us emails or made phone calls to us. I don't want those folks, while we as a board, as your elected officials, hear your sentiments, whatever they are, it is still really your responsibility to come to town meeting and vote. You don't have to speak, but it is your responsibility to vote on matters. And so I think this board is acting responsibly in support of putting this on the fall town meeting based on what we have heard from residents and businesses. So with that, Christy, I believe we should probably have an actual motion, right, at this point, to put this on the fall town meeting.
Shelby, before we go there, can I just make one parting comment?
Well, yeah, you can make the parting comment, but I just would like to hear from Christy, if you don't mind.
I was just going to say you don't really need a motion. We would prepare the warrant article for you, and then you would have to vote to place it on the town meeting warrant
At that time.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but we're in agreement.
Yeah.
To do that. Okay. Yes, Syed.
I hope Dr. Raver will be involved in that discussion.
Yeah, we've already secured his contract for a future presentation. No, I absolutely, Syed. I think, I think that it's really important that we come from, we have clear words and language, and Dr. Raver is very attentive to that in his presentation, which I think is critical to any discussion. So yes, thank you. Okay. All right. So, Christy, I think we're good with this item unless I missed something. Okay. All right. We will move to our next item. And Dr. Raver, thank you very much. Sorry, I didn't want to see. You're welcome to stay on, but thank you very much. We are enlightened. Thank you. So we'll move to our next presentation, which is a presentation by Eversource on an update to the Worcester Feedline. Christy, before I turn it over to you, let me just grab my notes here. I just want to refresh the public's memory of sort of where we're at and why we're here today. Eversource has proposed a project that will run through the heart of Westborough. That is referred to as the Worcester Feedline Improvement Project. This board hosted a public hearing on January 28th, which was well attended. The board received comments before and after that meeting in writing and certainly through phone calls and otherwise. And we continue to receive comments regarding this project. Following that meeting, a letter was sent to our state representatives and senator on June 1st, outlining the community's concerns with the project, as well as seeking support from those representatives and the senator to address Westborough's concerns. And we, as a board, we asked our town manager to work with Chief Purcell, and we delegated that responsibility of Syed, Selectman Hashmi, and also John Metzger from Sustainable Westborough have been working very closely with our town manager and fire chief to further those discussions with Eversource. And I think that brings us up to speed to today. So Christy, I'll turn it over to you.
So we've been working with town council, who has been in touch with Eversource's council. And so we had listed our concerns with the project, the concerns specifically that we heard at the January 14th public hearing. And so we did receive a response from Eversource related to the concerns that we had listed. And also they were proposing an amended alternate route. So we asked Eversource to come back and present the responses to the concerns that we had so that the full board could hear them, as well as the community, and also present the amended alternate route. And then you'll note that there was discussion at the January 14th meeting about gas leaks in Westborough. That's also been part of the conversations that we've had with Eversource. And so they'll address that related to the Worcester Feedline Improvement Project, but also just in general, and that's why it's listed as a separate agenda item, directly following this agenda item.
Okay, and so from Eversource, if the folks want to go ahead and introduce yourself for the public, I'm not sure who will be speaking or if you'll be sharing the microphone.
Good evening, everyone. This is Sean Lozier. I am the Community Relations and Economic Development Specialist for Eversource. I hope everyone's doing well. I'm joined by two different groups. So I'll start with the Feedline Improvement Project group. Sean Berthium is a senior engineer on the project. Matt Waldrip is with our environmental licensing and permitting group. He's running point on all of the permits, et cetera, that'll be filed in relation to the project. Mark Bergeron from Epsilon Associates is also joining us, and he'll be able to walk up the design of the rep, comment on that. And then separate for the next presentation, Daniel Henry, the manager of gas or district, which includes Westborough as a whole. So I was going to propose as well, since there's two presentations back to back, do feel like the first presentation on gas leaks may inform some of the discussion on the Feedline Improvement Project. I'm happy to do that one first or keep the agenda as it is now, but I do feel like that discussion may, answer some questions before they're asked. It may inform or spark some other questions. So I did want to make the offer.
Shelby, you're on mute.
Oh, yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Sean. Welcome back. Good to see you again. Yes, I think that would be great. So I'm fine. We have the time that's allocated to Eversource in general. So let's use it however best we all collectively can. So, and I do, Sean, we are hearing a little bit of delay in when you're speaking. So I may interrupt you if that continues.
Okay, let me know and I can always dial in if necessary. So for this presentation, it'll be myself, Dan Henry, the manager of gas operations, as I said, and Sean Berthium may chime in on some of the engineering side questions if they come up. I'm going to try to share my screen with you and then take the presentation from there.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, can everyone see that presentation on my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Thank you.
Perfect. So before we start, in this presentation will cover the classification of gas leaks, the Eversource approach to responding to a gas leak. We'll have some Westborough specific data in there as well. But I think first it's important to tell you about the three different types of leaks that we measure in the system. These are not our regulations. These are guided by the Department of Public Utilities, and they were put together by the Gas Technology and Piping Committee. So I'll go in order of severity. A Class 1 leak is considered the most severe. It is a probable hazard to persons. It requires an immediate repair or a continuous action until those conditions are no longer hazardous. And this is the kind of stereotypical leak where public safety would respond and there would probably be police and fire on scene for at least some part of it. A Class 2 leak is recognized as non-hazardous at the time, but does require monitoring and probable replacement or repair based on the potential for it to evolve into a Class 1. While it doesn't require an immediate response, we'll talk a little bit about how Eversource approaches Class 2s and now Class 3s in particular. Class 3s are the most common type of reported leak. They're considered non-hazardous at the time. They can reasonably be expected to remain so. However, there are some caveats around that we'll dig into in an upcoming slide. But a Class 3 leak is that sort of, maybe you hear or get, maybe a smell of something, but usually it's something that we detect on the system. Regardless of the class of leak, if you go to eversource.com to look at what to do for the smell of gas, the first thing you need to do if you smell it is leave if you're indoors. So we have a smell, leave, tell policy where if you smell gas, you need to leave where you are and go somewhere safe. Do not light a match, obviously, but don't open doors and windows. Don't use your cell phone. Don't try to get into your car and drive away. Just walk out to a safe location and then call 911. If 911 is called, they'll be able to respond and work with us on the response. If Eversource is called directly and the person does not call 911, we immediately dispatch a crew out to investigate. If the smell of gas is confirmed, municipal officials, usually public safety officials, will be notified. We'll confirm that there is a leak, as we do get a lot of smell of gas calls that turn out to either not be a leak or, there's a number of things that can come up, and we'll talk a bit about that as well. But I think the important thing to get across with this slide is that if you do smell gas, leave where you're at, call 911, and let public safety and let Eversource officials handle it from there. When it comes to the response to gas leaks, if we get a class 1 confirmed leak, we have an immediate response from our gas operations team that comes out. They will be assigned. They will not leave until repairs are completed. A confirmed leak that's a class 1 will also trigger a notification to public safety, and usually community relations, which would be myself in this case, will participate in relaying information back and forth as much as possible. In times pre-COVID, I would typically try to get to the scene if I was anywhere in the area, but obviously the times we're in now require a lot more digital communication and kind of phone to phone. For a class 2 confirmed leak, we monitor it. The monitoring is not to exceed 6 months, and we schedule a repair within 9 months of that classification. That is above and beyond what the federal government expects. They give you 12 months, and we make sure to get to them within 9. But at the company's discretion, it can be repaired faster or fast-tracked for repair. If it's a repeat odor, if it's in a problematic area, etc. For a confirmed class 3, since that is the least severe type of leak, we will continue to reevaluate it during subsequent surveys that won't exceed a year until it's either repaired or we no longer get a reading. I talked a bit about special conditions that could prompt a faster response. There's a class 3 in an environmentally sensitive area. If there's one nearby to a school, even if it's not, right on the school's property, or one that is a bit problematic in raising an issue in the town, it can be fast-tracked for repair. And the number of class 3 leaks that come up actually inform our pipeline replacement program, GSEP program, which is run through the state, and replaces old pipe with new, and that's how the majority of class 3s will eventually be remedied. In Westborough specific, and this is where I'm going to call in Dan Henry to begin to comment here, there are no current class 1 leaks, obviously, or Chief Purcell wouldn't be available right now, and he'd be on scene waiting for that. There are 2 class 2 leaks that have been identified. Those have been identified since, I believe, the month of April, but I'll defer to Dan on that. And then for class 3 leaks, there are 20 current that have given a reading, and 7 of which are on main scheduled for replacement. I'll let Dan dig in a little bit more on those numbers, and I'll just stop on this slide for a moment.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Dan Henry again. I'm the operations manager for the Southborough Gas District that covers Westborough as one of its towns. So I will say, kind of from a bigger picture looking down, Westborough is not one of the towns that keeps me up at night. What the infrastructure in Westborough is all relatively new. It's made up of mostly plastic and state-of-the-art pipe, although there is some older coated steel in the ground. There is no bare steel. There is no cast iron in the ground in Westborough, which is considered our most leak-prone and high-risk pipe. So there is none of that in the town of Westborough, which is good. You have cathodically protected coated steel systems and plastic systems in the town. And again, those are considered state-of-the-art pipe. So Westborough as a town is in very good shape. Year to date, we've had 3 class 1 leaks in the town, which again, that's very good by measure of most of the towns I cover. Your Framinghams, your Marlboroughs by comparison are all relatively much higher than that. Class 2s, only have 2 on the books. The district has 36 class 2s as of this evening, 2 of which are in Westborough. We just recently repaired one last week. So you're down to 2, and the other 2 are scheduled for repair within the month. Again, the fact that there's 2 in Westborough is actually almost an anomaly. Usually there's 1 or 0 as we sit here at this time of year. Class 3 leaks, there are 20. To be repetitive by comparison, a Framingham is significantly higher than that. 7 are scheduled on main, that's scheduled for replacement within the next 5 years. And just to briefly kind of double down on what Sean was talking about, there are class 3 leaks that we'd categorize as environmentally hazardous based on the spread of the gas and the strength of readings. Those are called high emitters. We treat those with the same caution as we would a class 2, and we repair them on the same timeline. So that's within a goal of 9 months of discovery. You have no high emitters, and you have no class 3 leaks on state-of-the-art piping. So your leaks are on old coated steel and a couple plastic leaks, which we'll be cutting out, like I said, in the next month or so. So that's kind of a summary of the leaks that exist in the system in Westborough. Again, overall, very good system, very strong system. Not one of the ones that keeps me up at night. So, pending any questions, I'll just take a break to hear your comments.
And before we do proceed, I do want to say, Eversource has almost 5,000 customers in Westborough, the vast majority of which are residential, but also including commercial, industrial, and of course, municipal government buildings. And I think this leak discussion is part of a larger discussion about a path forward that is less reliant on natural gas flowing through the pipes in town. At least that's what I, understood from conversations that I've had with folks both in town and in surrounding communities. So before we dig directly into this part of the discussion, I do want to briefly touch on the fact that we understand that there is a path forward that doesn't just involve natural gas, and that's why we do have a carbon neutral goal to be 100% carbon neutral by 2030, which exceeds many goals set by state governments, and it's the most ambitious goal of any utility in the country. And the way to do that does involve some of the existing infrastructure, and I'll be very brief as I talk about this, but the way forward is that no matter what happens, we'll continue to provide reliable, safe, and cost-effective energy to customers. And I think we've proven that by having the #1 energy efficiency program in the country. But aside from just wind and things that we talk about when we talk about green technology, there's also things like renewable natural gas that get less publicity. There's also hydrogen blended with natural gas into the pipeline system, natural gas heat pumps, etc. So I'm just going to touch very quickly on ways that these pipelines are going to be utilized, not in the distant future, but in the very near future, actually. Renewable natural gas takes something that is leaking into the atmosphere from landfills, farms, etc., captures it, cleans it, and then injects it into the pipeline for customer use. It's a way to not only reduce carbon emissions, but utilize existing infrastructure that would otherwise see reduced capacity 30 years down the line, 20 years down the line, even 10 or 15 years down the line. So, other states are already doing this. So too is Eversource. There's been a number of projects across the country, and specific to us, the Oak Ridge Dairy in Ellington, Connecticut, family-owned business with over 3,000 dairy cows, is partnering with us and Rev LNG on a methane capture program. We're already starting to bear some fruit from that. So as we have these discussions going forward, and as we continue to think about this holistically over the long term, not only are we continuing to provide energy now at the cheapest cost possible and the most efficient way possible, while recognizing that the path forward is going to take some adaptation and some thinking outside the box. Not everyone can do solar, not everyone can have a wind farm offshore. So we do think it's important. And to that point, I did just want to touch on some of the ways that we're going to utilize existing technology and mix it with new technology to make sure that customers are still receiving energy efficiently and reliably from us. So I'll stop there. If you need me to jump back to any slides, please feel free to ask.
So I think it would be, thank you, Sean. I think it would be helpful, for you to proceed with the presentation as it relates to the project. Let's let the board hear all of that, and then we'll allow time for questions, because I have a feeling you'll probably touch on some of those that we might ask now.
Perfect. So just to reiterate, I'll be participating in this presentation as well. However, Sean Berthium, senior engineer, will be running point on the slides. Matt Waldrop from Environmental Licensing and Permitting will be able to speak to some of those particulars. And Mark Bergeron from Epsilon is also joining us as well. And I'll turn it over to Sean Berthing from.
Sean, if you're talking, you're on mute.
Nope, no, he's on here. So let me.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you. Thanks, Sean. Sean, your beard has grown since we last saw you. Can you hear us, Sean? Not yet.
Oh, might be.
That or it wasn't funny. I don't know.
He must be having some kind of technical issue.
Yeah, he's texting someone here, so.
Okay. Yeah, he's having a little bit of a sound issue.
Okay.
So I'll just take 1 second, and if not, I'll begin to walk through it, and we'll ask Matt and Mark to help out until he can dial in.
All right. All right. We'll turn it over to both of the Seans then.
Sean, can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right, sorry, but I'm not
There we go.
sure what the issue is.
So Sean, just because I'm not sure if you could hear, I made a joke about your beard. I said you've been, the COVID, you've been growing a beard this whole time since we last saw you. I like it.
Yes, that's correct. I guess I needed something to do in this time of isolation here.
Right. All right. Well, you have the floor.
And I apologize. I seem to be having some difficulties here. I'm gonna try unplugging my external monitor. I'm having some trouble hearing.
So we see your lips moving, but we can't hear you. Always the hard part. When the technology fails us, right? So
I was going to say the new reality has some quirks, huh?
Right.
So I can begin, and I don't know, Matt and Mark, if your audio is working. Sean just texted me. He's gonna dial in from his phone.
Our Alan, our local resident technologist says, click on the 3 dots and select your audio, Sean. It's in the lower right-hand corner. All right, Chanel, why don't we proceed with the rest of the team here, just because I don't want to lose time.
Okay, so you will recall that we were here in January to make some initial presentations about the project, and I'm just going to hold for 1 second because Sean is literally dialing in now. And I didn't want to steal his thunder. He's been working on that beard since March, and he deserves to show it off for me.
Absolutely.
Can you hear me now, folks?
Yes, we can. Thanks, Sean.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Well, thank you for your patience in allowing me to figure out technology here. Sean, will you be, you're going to continue with the presentation, or would you like me to display?
I'll keep my screen up just since it's already up and working.
That would be helpful. Thank you. So thank you to the board for giving us this time this evening. So Sean, if you can go into the next slide. So tonight, we do want to provide an update, kind of where we are since the last time we were before you, and also, give a brief recap of the need and the scope of the project, as well, just to kind of refresh everyone's memory. So Sean, with that, if you could go into the next slide. So here at Eversource, we are constantly evaluating our existing gas system throughout our service territories to identify areas that need improvement or areas of vulnerability or on our system. And this project is one that was identified through that process. And this project would consist of approximately 5 miles of 16-inch coated steel gas main through both Southborough and Westborough. And this project is required to improve the overall reliability of the distribution system through several towns and remove a pressure drop that we currently experience on our system. So the area of concern or the issue that was identified does exist now. And basically what happens is there's an existing line that runs between Hopkinton and Worcester, serving several towns along the way. And between the start and end of that line, we experience a significant pressure drop. And that pressure drop is due to the increase in demand on that line since it was installed in the early 1970s, as well as the frictional loss between the gas itself inside the pipe and the interior surface wall of the pipe. And that is common, it's a common occurrence for long pipelines for any substance that may be going through, whether it be gas or water or some other substance. And as I mentioned, this existing line does serve many towns along the way. And Westborough is one of those towns, and also the town of Westborough does not have any district regulators or gate stations that are located within the town's limits. The town is served via this line and several district regulators that are located just on the outskirts of the town limits. Sean, next slide, please. Oh, I detailing it. Good. As I mentioned, along the kind of the route of this project, there are about 9 towns that this existing line serves between between Hopkinton and Worcester, that serve a total of about 31,000 customers. And as Sean mentioned earlier, about 5,000 customers are in Westborough. And the project will increase pressure along the line and improve reliability of service to not only the customers at the end in Worcester who are experiencing the most acute pressure problem, but also the 12 district regulators along the route that that serve the other 9 towns, including Westborough. And as Sean mentioned, there are other projects or other pilots that are out there with renewable natural gas and heat pumps and demand response and other things that the company is looking to take a forward approach on and be at the lead of that charge to investigate those alternatives and their feasibility for not only just physical feasibility to actually construct, but also the feasibility for cost. And that's something that the company is evaluating, but at this time, we still have the obligation to serve our existing customers and future. And this project is still needed to ensure that reliability. But in addition, we are still working on those other alternatives. But at this time, they're not a complete replacement, for a project such as this. Next slide, Sean, please. So this map here, I'll talk about this briefly. This map kind of outlines the existing distribution system throughout the overall service territory. So the red line on this map represents the existing line path. The little orange or yellow dots that you see represent district regulators, and then the blue line represents kind of the proposed project area. Next slide, Sean, please. So this project entails, as I mentioned, about 5 miles of 16-inch pipe between both Southborough and Westborough, with about 1.2 miles being in Southborough and about 3.8 in Westborough. The project is currently proposed entirely within public roadways. And typically what would be expected is an excavated trench approximately 3 feet in width and 4 to 5 feet deep, depending on the actual conditions encountered. At the end of each day, the trench will be backfilled. There may be some situations where a small portion of the trench is left open for ease of continuation the next day. But for the most part, at the end of each day, the trench will be temporarily paved. Once the project is complete, the company will work in conjunction with the town and in the requirements of the local permitting and state permitting for that matter, and more permanent paving will be completed. During the construction, all of the weld joints on the steel pipe are first visually inspected and then x-ray tested to ensure that their strength and reliability. And then before the pipeline is placed in service, it'll go through a rigorous pressure test. As part of this project, it is all proposed to be subsurface. There are no proposed above ground facilities or equipment as part of this project. Next slide, John, please. So as you know, this is where the company is still early in the process of getting this project reviewed and approved. And this is something that the company is committed to working with the town on for things like traffic management plans. And obviously those will need to be developed in close coordination with several departments within the town, police and fire, to ensure that proper and safe travel for pedestrians, just local commuters, folks who travel to the town that even don't live in the town, and emergency vehicles as well. And prior to construction, there'll be notifications that go out of the construction starting, and that we can work with the town to make sure things like that are posted on town message boards or town websites. The company will also employ maybe some mailings and things of that nature, and we will also use traffic signs, cones, message boards, flaggers, and things of that nature to ensure that the traffic management is safe and properly set up. Eversource will continue to work with the town as we move through this project, not only as well as the DOT for town and DOT projects that are in the pipeline and scheduled, to make sure that we work in conjunction with each other and that we're hopefully we can maintain a smooth construction operation. As far as storing equipment and materials, there may be some equipment and materials that start on the side of the road on a very small scale at the end of each workday. However, we will have a laydown area somewhere else in either Westborough or neighboring towns where the contractors will park most of their vehicles, store excess material, and also equipment at the end of the day. And I think important to note that we will work with the town in conjunction with the requirements for work hours, as well as the traffic management plan. But at the end of each day, it is intended that whatever segment of road that was isolated for the construction effort would be opened up at the end of the day, and normal travel would be opened. So as I mentioned, we're still early on in the permitting process. I'll touch a little bit on the schedule in a few moments here. But at this time, construction wouldn't be scheduled to start until 2022 at the earliest. Construction would start at this point in time in Southborough, and then move towards Westborough. So primarily the first year of construction would be in Southborough, with a small piece potentially being in Westborough, and then the second year of construction would be in Westborough. Next slide, Sean, please. This is just a quick high-level overview of the different permits that we've identified that this project will require. And again, these permits have not been filed at this time. So several local and state permits will be required, so we'll continue to move through that effort as we progress through the project. Next slide, Sean. This is just a high-level map. This is a map that was included in the presentation back in January. So the blue route was the preferred route that was presented last time, and the kind of yellow-colored route is what was the notice alternative. And you'll see that they share the route they share the same kind of roadway, the Southville Road in Southborough and Flanders Road in Westborough, up to the intersection of Connector Road and Flanders Road where the two would split. Next slide, Sean. So I think this was mentioned previously at the last Board of Selectmen meeting, and since then there was some discussion about potential alternative route and if the company could consider another route that goes up Connector Road and stops at Route 9 in the intersection of Connector Road and does not travel down Route 9. So since the September 14th meeting, January 14th meeting, the company has gone back and looked at this route on a high level basis. And some of the benefits that we've identified so far are it is a shorter route. It does appear to impact less residential, commercial, and industrial land uses. And due to the fact that it's shorter, which would tend to lead towards, the fact that it would take less time to build. Another benefit would be that, if this route were to be pushed forward, it could potentially eliminate some conflicts with construction on Route 9, specifically the newly reconstructed intersections at Route 9 and Lyman Street, which was something that I know came up at the last hearing. Some of the initial downfalls or challenges that we see with this potential alternative route are it does not provide the same level of reliability and system improvement as the other routes do. So Sean, if you can go into the next slide, we can show some of those things that I'm talking about. It's approximately, from our initial analysis, 13 psi less benefit from this route to the others. Judging by some surface review and kind of Google Maps and field walks, there's the potential for some ledge there, as well as to make the connection to the existing pipeline at the intersection of Connector Road and Route 9. There may be the requirement to acquire some property rights or an easement from the property owner that owns the land on the corner there where the hotel is. So those are kind of high level what the company has evaluated to date. I think there's some more communication that needs to happen between the town. Specifically, we've heard from some of the folks in DPW, that we want to continue to investigate, whether there's an actual corridor for the existing or for the pipe to be installed on that portion of Connector Road to make sure there was no conflicts with existing water or sewer or what have you. To date, the company has received existing plans for existing utilities for the other kind of portions of the other two routes, except for that one piece of connector. So that's something we're working offline to continue to review with the DPW. I'll continue that discussion in a moment. Yeah, Sean, you can go to the next slide. Thank you. So to date, this is really briefly kind of a list of all the meetings that we've held to date, and we will continue to do them as necessary, not only with town officials in both towns, with affected landowners that live by each route in each town. Obviously, we presented at the Board of Selectmen meeting back in January, and we've also met with some of the state agencies that we will have to provide or request a permit from to give them a heads up that this project will be coming down the line. Next slide, John. So this is just, again, a high-level overview of the schedule. It's been updated since our last meeting. And so I mentioned, we're at this point expecting that the petition to the siting board would be submitted in the September timeframe of this year, with other state and local permitting beginning in early 2021. And obviously, the start date is subject to change based on the receival of those permits and the time frame that it takes. As I mentioned, we are at the beginning of this project as it relates to permitting. and we will continue to, to work with the town as this schedule develops. At the best case, provided we receive our necessary permits, the construction would start in the spring of 2022 in Southborough, as I mentioned earlier. Next slide, Sean. So with that, Sean Lozier, who presented earlier, his email and phone number is here on this slide, and we also have the link to the company website for this project that was set up. We will continue to update as we do get into permitting and when there are substantial updates. So with that, I guess that would conclude the formal presentation for the project and update. And I offer open to the Board of Selectmen to maybe receive any comments or thoughts on the potential alternative route, whether it be positive or negative, that maybe the company has not identified to date. So with that, thank you very much for your time.
And this is Sean Lozier. I'll just very briefly add, I'll send both of these presentations first thing tomorrow to the board so you have them for the record as well.
Great, thank you very much. I think we'll keep, just so we don't have to deal with technology, in case we've got to refer back to the presentation, let's keep that up for now.
Yeah.
And members of the board can change their layout if they want to see other members by using the 3 dots on the right-hand side there. Christy, do you want to, I see your hand up?
Yep. I was, watching, I was surprised with this presentation because I really thought that you were going to offer a presentation that spoke directly to the issues that we raised. I actually pulled up your January presentation and it was pretty well able to follow along. So I was disappointed. I feel like aside from amending the alternate route, which is obviously not your preferred route, you haven't responded to the town's concerns. So I'm just wondering if maybe I missed something, if you can touch on the things that you've done to incorporate the town's concerns into the project that you're proposing at this point that you were not proposing in January.
I can elaborate on some things here. I think as the project relates to to leaks in general, I will mention that this line that we're working on does not have any leaks on it. None of the existing leaks or leaks that have recently been repaired are on this line that we are looking to tie into and add to our system. So I guess before we go too far, Christy, just to maybe refresh to make sure I adequately address your concerns, could you maybe just refresh my memory on some of the concerns and I can speak to those more specifically?
Yep. So in summary, there was one of the concerns that we raised is that there's a limited benefit to Westborough residents. Specifically, we're looking for exactly what the need is for this project in Westborough. The conflict with the state, local, and Eversource energy goals, I know it was very briefly touched upon, very similar to in January, and so I'm wondering how you, how you've responded to that. And then the alternative solution to the pressure performance problem. We did talk about leaks in January, so I guess we're surprised to hear that there's, now there's no leaks. And then, obviously we raised some other communication concerns, specifically with your communication with our fire department, which is less about this project and more of an overall general concern about Eversource's communication related to this project, and then also related to our communication with public safety.
So should I start, or do you want to jump in first?
I think I will touch on some things, Sean, first. So in regards to need, so as I mentioned, this project does not only, although in Westborough, in Worcester, where the pressure issue is most acute, this line does serve the towns along the way. So the way that the system works is we have to be cautious about loads and customer demand that's added to the system. And if we do nothing and we continue to add load to the system, which would make our pressure problem worse. And we can't, although the worst case scenario is in Worcester, we can't necessarily add load further upstream in Westborough and the other neighboring towns that could, that would further detriment the pressure at the end. And so one of the ways is that eventually, if we do nothing, we may have to reach a point where we do not allow future gas service off this line, or for the systems that are served off this line, due to the fact that they would continue to make a system deficiency worse in another area. And as I mentioned, this line does. This is how your town is served to the 5,000 customers in your town. This is how the gas gets there. So that's I guess how it would relate to the project as far as the need. And then as far as leaks, I can touch on that a little bit. So I think there might be maybe a miscommunication there. So there, as Dan and Sean presented earlier, there are leaks in the town. There aren't leaks on this specific line that that are in question, and that the leaks are not a cause for the loss of pressure. That is due to the amount of gas that needs to flow through the line and the restriction between that gas and the pipe wall. And I can say that the amount of leaks, not only just in Westborough, but just if you can compare that to a town at the state as a whole in all our service territories, the amount of gas that is expelled from all of leaks is very, very negligible and minute in comparison to the amount of gas that flows through this particular pipeline on a given day. And would not, fixing all leaks in every single town would not negate the need for this project. And Sean, maybe you could, speak on some of the other, as far as communications and things like that.
Yep, and I'll just to piggyback on Sean's point, I think the benefit to the people in Westborough is that 1 out of 6 people on this line are Westborough residents. So, and that doesn't include the 700 additional customers that are being added at the construction site up by the old state hospital. So, there's a substantial number of residents that will benefit from correcting for the pressure loss. On the notification side, when there is a report of smell of gas, we tell people to call 911. If they don't call 911 and they call Eversource, we dispatch a crew immediately. If we confirm a leak, a notification is sent. As I said, that notification comes via email to the address on file. During the incident that you were talking about, the notification did go out. It went to an unmonitored email address at the fire department. Luckily, Chief Laurie did receive it at the police department side. Following that, I spoke to Chief Purcell, went right back to dispatch, updated the email address to his personal email so that he'll get it on his phone. I've also committed to calling him if there is a class 1 directly and remaining in communication with him end to end. A lot of the issue seems to be that when we receive a smell of gas call and the person didn't call 911, that we're not immediately notifying public safety agencies. Aside from not being, the procedure and policy that's in place at the state level and what's required to DPU, it's not feasible to make that type of request of public safety agencies. Half of the day would be spent driving around to smell of gas calls that are not class 1 leaks and do not require a public safety response. The phone call that will go out if, knock on wood, if there is another class 1 in town, I'll be calling as it happens, as it's reported. And aside from just the notification, which admittedly gives very basic information, just tells you that there's a confirmed class 1, usually tells you that we're on site, making repairs, etc. He'll receive end-to-end communication on more specific matters regarding a leak. And again, if we weren't in COVID times, I'll respond to the scene, but during the pandemic, things being what they are, I will call on my phone and remain in contact until all repairs are made. And that's really above and beyond what's required by the state.
And Sean, I will, one point I believe I didn't cover on was Christie's questions in regards to, the state energy goals. So as we did talk about briefly, the several pilot programs that we are proposing to do or to investigate to not only look at their cost feasibility, but their their just feasibility to be a reliable energy provider. And we are committed to working on those goals so that maybe it's someday we can be on the forefront of proposing those things instead of other alternatives. However, we're not at that point yet, and we still have an obligation to serve our existing customers and future customers that we may be added to our system. And although natural gas may be a fossil fuel, switching customers from oil to gas and other fossil fuels does have a reduction in carbon emissions due to the efficiency of new technology and gas burning equipment. So that is being able to support new gas customers does help reduce carbon emissions. And like, as I mentioned, this problem that we're trying to correct does exist now. And those other alternatives such as renewable natural gas and some of the heat pump alternatives have not been proven sufficiently to negate the need for pipeline alternatives. And the company, we are a regulated utility by the Department of Public Utilities, and we are working with them on these pilot programs to make sure that they fit into our business. And this project is the Department of Public Utilities is responsible or charged with overseeing how natural gas is sold and distributed in the state of Massachusetts. And this project has to go before them. So we will be working in conjunction with them to make sure that we've presented a project, clearly that is needed, which the company is confident and stands behind the fact that this project does have a need to correct an issue that we have in our system now.
And I'll just add and then turn it back over that, we hear concerns loud and clear to the point that, groups like HEAT and Mothers Out Front, we actually work with to aggressively tackle issues around class 3 gas leaks in particular. And we've had substantive conversations with groups like that, and we've been able to implement newer policies and updated policies that recognize some of those concerns. So we're not turning a blind eye to any of that, but we are also balancing that with the need to continue to provide energy to people as we get to these as we progress from these bridge fuels to a more renewable and reliable solution. But until we get there, our obligation does remain with the customer as we explore these different alternatives.
And to the chair, if I may add one more thing, if I may.
Yep.
One thing that I don't know if we touched on earlier was that as part of one of our goals to remove leaks in the system and just our carbon emissions is we have an accelerated program that is state mandated and state run to replace leak-prone pipe in our systems. And that is a very extensive program, and we do 55 and 60 miles a year of pipe replacement to expedite getting that leak-prone pipe out of the ground. So, thank you.
Thanks, Sean. I'm going to. I've got several members of the board who have asked to speak. And before I open it up to the board, I am going to ask. I know Chief Purcell is on. You were specifically interested in regards to some class 1 leaks. I just want to give you an opportunity to comment if you'd like to.
Hi, good evening, Pat Purcell, Fire Chief in Westborough. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak. So I do have a concern with gas leaks in Westborough, and yes, I have worked with Sean for the last few months, pretty much since April. I do have a concern about the fire department not being notified of gas leaks. I'm a little bit confused listening to some of the presentation tonight. If there truly are this few amount of gas leaks that exist, I don't understand how, if they notified us of gas leaks in town, we would spend half of our day driving around chasing gas leaks. But beside the point, I have a concern with the emergency response plan that Eversource mails every year. I've addressed that in an email, And I still think that there's a gap that exists. So if I'm a customer and I call the gas company, and this is a quote from Eversource, they operate under the assumption that 911 has already been called. And to me, I don't think that that's the right way that anybody should think. If we all operated that way, I don't think we would officially be in a life-saving business. I think that we should be notified. I didn't like finding out from the police chief that I had a grade 1 leak at Cumberland Farms. I did receive an email on a second grade 1 leak on Hundreds Road, and I don't know of the third one off the top of my head. I don't know that I was actually notified about that. I could be wrong, but to my knowledge, I only had a record of 2. I don't feel also that emailing the police chief and the fire chief about a grade 1 leak is sufficient. I don't sit on my email 24 hours a day, particularly in the middle of the night. I think that those calls should go direct to a dispatch center, and we have policies in place to notify personnel of that. And also, by not notifying a dispatch center and not notifying an on-duty crew of a significant leak, you're kind of taking away their ability to do things like risk assessment and pre-think a call and pre-plan and what if there's a catastrophic result of that leak. And we've seen that in Massachusetts several times, Springfield, Mass, Lawrence, Mass. And I just don't like the whole way the system is set up. I think that also by not notifying us, it promotes a lack of transparency. So we really never have an appreciation for the volume of leaks that exist. And I just feel that lack of transparency makes me a little bit concerned about this project going forward. 16-inch gas main is a or gas line is a very big line. If somebody strikes that line, that's not and it explodes. That's a catastrophic event. People will probably get hurt. I just feel like the system could be set up a little bit better for notifying us of any leaks in our community. What else did I have? I think that's pretty much what I had regard to leaks. I do have other concerns I could talk about later with the project that may be coming, but
So thank you, Chief Purcell. If you do want to talk now about your concerns with the proposed route or the alternative, that is, well, I mean, they could be your prior comments and they haven't changed, or new since this presentation or other conversations with Eversource. Feel free.
A little bit of both. So to repeat myself from before, you saw in the presentation there'll be trenches 3.8 miles. There'll be a trench 3.8 miles. Extending from the Southborough line all the way to Route 9, varying from 4 to 5 feet deep. Our department does not have any capability internally for handling trench type emergencies. So I would be looking for some, sorry, I stayed still too long, some mitigation for some training or some equipment should an incident occur. And as far as a new concern, just if they do use the alternative route, that's going to potentially open up a blasting concern. If there is ledge, as they spoke of, then we'll have to deal with that also. So either way, probably not great routes, but I mean, we'll certainly work well, but I just do have some concerns for both of them.
Thank you, Chief Purcell. Selectman Hashmi?
So, Madam Chair, first I'd like to thank Christy and John Metzger and various town officials. We were charged by you, i.e. the board, to take this project on. And I just want to echo what Christy has said. I mean, there were Christy had wrote, and I think the board had was CC'd on this, a really based on the conversations that we had, a really detailed memo outlining our concerns. And yet again, I'm sorry, I did not hear my questions being answered. And one of the things I would just point out to the board is we are being told that there is a drop in demand, but we have not been told, we have not been given independent data to submit that, to substantiate that demand. Okay, so our residents are going to face significant disruption, take risk for this, but we have not been shown any independent data to suppress that, to support that. The second, I'm also somewhat surprised about and this kind of echoes what Chief Purcell is saying, about the gas leaks in the town. So granted, I will grant that maybe there's very few or zero gas leaks in Westborough. Okay, I'll work with that assumption. But I have not been shown any data on what are the gas leaks en route for this pipeline. And second, I'm being told that, hey, only a minimal amount of gas is lost due to these leaks. Well, who's measuring this? How is this being measured? And again, I would like to get the data for that. Along those lines, if let us say that this gas is being leaked I'm sorry, I have to speak from a vascular surgery perspective. If you have a leak when your blood vessels are leaking, if you fix it, the pressure should go up. So my question is, why can't we just do that with the line and see what happens with the pressure? And to go along that thought, ISO New England estimates COVID-19 has cut energy demand by 3 to 5%. I do not know how long this pandemic has lasted, but that is at least somebody that has shown me data on what has happened to energy consumption. I have not been shown any data, independent data from them. I would also remind the board that at the same time we are talking about this pipeline, Eversource is also talking about a rate increase during a pandemic in a state which has one of the highest rates of unemployment. So the question is, we are going to be putting in this line, and potentially we may have to pay for this line, which we may or may not need. And so the other, several, I think John Metzger, several other members of the community have raised this question: would Eversource commit in writing to the town that we will never have to pay for this pipeline? And then the last thing I would just, sorry, not last, but the other thing that I would just point out is that this also goes against, and many have pointed this out, this also goes against our town's, and Christy raised this in her letter, our town's goals on energy efficiency. Lastly, at our last meeting, I had brought a New England Journal of Medicine article out that which stated that natural gas has been portrayed as a bridge to the future, but now the data shows that it's only a tether to the past. And at every stage of this process of producing natural gas, of transmitting natural gas, is linked with environmental and health hazards. And so this is something, and Chief Purcell alluded to this, it's not just a catastrophic event in case of a line failure, it is the concerns with the gas from the moment it is produced to the moment it is delivered. So we, as the New England Journal article mentioned, and this is not just some fly-by wheel magazine, this is one of the world's premier medical journals stating that expansion of natural gas infrastructure should be considered a hazard to human health. So I would say first that for me, as a selectman, as a consumer, I'm more interested in looking at the data. I'm looking at fixing the leaks. I'm looking at finding out what happens after those leaks are fixed, and then showing me whether this project is needed or not. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Selectman Hashmi. I know that folks from Eversource have been asked a number of questions, as well as presented with some information that they may want to respond to. But in the interest of time, I want to allow the board members to present their questions and concerns. We do have a limited amount of time on the agenda for them. And I think I'll just jump in and say that I don't think this is the last of the conversation, given what is being presented. So there will be other opportunities. Selectman Emery.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I think Pat Purcell's concerns about communications of any breaks should be fixed immediately. There's no reason that should take any time. They should just change the protocol and meet his needs for notification. And to clarify something, the Climate Action Plan is recommending that we foster movement from oil to electricity, not from oil to gas and then to electricity. The ultimate is clean source electricity. And to ask homeowners to make two moves is just unrealistic. And then I think you should add to the benefits of the alternative plan that this whole school issue would be avoided because that alternative does not get near the Hastings School, which is terribly important. We brought that up many times before. And it also would put less of an impediment for emergency vehicle calls interference to the east end and on Flanders. And that's very, very significant. So we got two other very important benefits of using the alternative route. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Selectman Edinburgh, you wanted to speak.
Yes, a few questions. I'm wondering if Eversource could remind us what the PSI of this pipe is proposed to be.
Madam Chair, would you like us to respond now?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, sorry. Yes, please. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm hearing an echo.
The operating pressure of the existing line is 273 pounds. That's the maximum operating pressure. And the new proposed, that's what the existing line that runs through Westborough is now. And the proposed project would operate at the same pressure.
Okay, so one of the challenges you said to the revised alternate route is that it would be 13 PSI difference. That's 0.5%. Is that really a significant challenge? No need to answer. The question is slightly rhetorical. In the sparse written response to the town's concerns that was included in our packet, there's mention of residential growth on this line creating demand, but there's actually no data. So how many residential hookups have been made per year for the last 5 years, and what's your projection? Sean said that if the project's not done, at some point in the future, you'd have to stop allowing new connections. I guess my initial comment to that is you're not saying when. Are you talking about, this project isn't going to be done till 2023. So you're talking if the project isn't done, that connection stop in 2024, or is it 2027, or is it 2030? Let's see that data. And I want to know because when the state has outlined its energy strategy plan, the state's projection is that natural gas usage will peak in the state between 2025 and 2027 and then go into a state of decline. So when Sean says that we may have to stop new hookups to the gas line, part of my response is that's great. That's what we're trying to do. The state is trying to move off of fossil fuels. So the fact that you're going to reach a point where you're going to no longer add new customers is part of the plan. There will be a time when you're not supposed to be adding new customers, when people are supposed to be moving off of gas. And so without having received any data on the demand and on the projections of when you expect to run out of capacity, where the pressure problem in Worcester would be low enough that service is actually at risk, your plan here and the need and your claim that you need this project and that it even fits remotely within the state plans to move off of fossil fuels are empty. And to expound on what Christy said and others have said, the fact that your presentation here tonight was a rehash of what we saw in January with none of the information that we've asked for is extremely disappointing and I think somewhat disrespectful to the board and the public here. And it's not a valuable use of our time or your own. So, in my mind, you need to go back to the drawing board. You need to come back and answer our questions, answer the concerns as outlined in the effort. We want to see data. We want to see specifics, because telling me that at some point in the future it's going to be a crisis, prove it. Thanks.
Thank you, Selectman Edinburgh. Selectman Johnson, yes, please.
Yeah, I just have a quick question because others have stated, so I don't want to rehash anything. But if I remember correctly, from the January meeting with this alternative route down Connector Road, there was talk about needing to replace pipe in Route 9, which was brought up as concern. The way it looks right now, we were able to hook into that existing pipe. So just a question on that is, did I remember correctly that there was talk about that we would have to replace pipe on Route 9 to go down to Lyman Street where the other one was proposed? And if that is true, and it might not be, I could be misremembering, what has changed that just has it ending at that point right now where it connects into the existing pipe on Route 9 at the Route 9 Connector Road intersection. So that's the only thing I had, Madam Chair.
Eversource, do you want to respond to that specific question?
Sure, Madam Chair, I can respond to that. So you're correct that in the original notice alternative route, there was that was presented back in January. There was if that route were selected, that would involve installing or replacing a section of the line from Connector to Lyman Street on Route 9. And I would say that as far as the need is concerned, nothing's changed there. We went back and evaluated that, shortening that route and what that would do to the benefit of constructing this project. And that's where that, that 13-pound difference that I mentioned earlier comes in. And if I may clarify one thing on that, the 13-pound difference is not 13 pounds from the starting pressure to the ending pressure. The 13 pounds is a 13 pounds less of pressure gained back. So right now, from the start to end of this line during peak times, we're experiencing over 150-pound pressure difference between the start and end. And as part of this project, we don't gain it all back, but we gain it a significant amount back. So that 13 pounds is in reference to the benefit that is gained back.
Shelby,
yeah, I'm mute. Sorry, Selectman Edinburgh, did you have a follow-on question to that, to Sean's comment, or?
No, that clarifies the statement about the 13 PSI difference. It's still, I guess, as part of a broader response that we're still waiting for, is to know whether that's a material impact.
So, Ian, are you all set? Okay. So I'm not going to take the board's time or Eversource's time or the public's time to ask many of the same great questions that were posed. I have a list of questions that are an arm lengths long that weren't asked here, but I think suffice it to say that it feels like Eversource didn't really hear the public's concerns the first time around. I mean, you've said that you heard them, but we haven't seen any solid, thoughtful responses to them. Specifically, even in the letter that our town manager sent, this board has not seen specific responses. So that's concerning. To Selectman Edinburgh's point, the presentation that we saw here tonight, while always a good refresher, is the same that we saw months ago when it was much colder outside. I fully anticipated that we were going to get an update that would talk about the alternate route and why it was or wasn't a good option for the town and or Eversource. And to be honest with you, it sounds like it was I'm sure there's been lots of discussion about it. I don't want to doubt your word on that, but it seems like it was sort of more a cursory approach to this presentation, and its position toward the end of the presentation sort of is evidence of that. To Selectman Emery's point, I would add that one of the benefits of the alternate route is that it avoids a heavily congested area of places of worship, as well as local businesses and a continuing care retirement community that has hundreds of seniors living there as well, many who are critically ill. And so by avoiding that area, you potentially avoid any impact to not only lives that are there, but to people that visit and do business, etc. So I would ask you to look at that. But in general, I would just say that I don't think you've listened to us, and I'm not sure how else to say it. So I think you guys have to go back to the drawing board, and this board would appreciate responses. We're not going to be able to cover that now. Appreciate you coming to us, but it's a bit of a disappointment to be honest.
Madam Chair, this is
Yeah,
Sean
sure.
Loser. I do apologize. I didn't mean to interject on you there. I am sorry that the board does feel that way. But I think off of the project and on the leak specifically, I know the chief mentioned the ERP, which is the emergency response presentation that gets sent out to officials. I may have sent it to the board as well, just for reference. I'm not 100% sure. But the chief indicated he wanted to meet on that. That presentation was sent on the 24th of June. On the 25th of June, I proposed a meeting with our emergency management team. I sent that to the chief. I sent it to Chief Laurie, sent it to Christy and some other folks as well. I reiterated that request on July 9th as well. I'll reiterate it again here that if we do want to have that conversation, I'm more than happy to get our emergency response team involved. And to his point, I will just reiterate my commitment to using the phone and calling him, and I can add dispatch to my call sheet as well during any future knock on wood incident.
Yeah, I appreciate you pointing that out, and it sounds like that's an immediate first step, independent of this project. And to be honest with you, I don't know enough about emergency management systems, but it sure shouldn't require you, who might want to take a vacation day, and our chief as well, and our other in our police chief. So there's got to be a way to automate that engages public safety officials who are boots on the ground here a whole lot faster than Eversource or any other utility can get here. So appreciate that you guys will take that offline and work, and I know our chief will include our town manager in that update and by the board.
Madam Chair?
So we are at 7:17. I made a commitment to the board to keep us on track. I did hear, I think Syed, you had one. Did you just ask to speak?
Yes, could I just, so there, with regards to the comments that the board has made, what is the process for those to be answered? Will Christy be writing them another letter saying, hey, these were the concerns raised by the board, and we want these questions? What is the resolution here with all the questions that we've raised yet again? How are they going to be addressed?
Well, I mean, I think that we've listed that. We can certainly formalize a letter. I mean, to be honest with you, it might just be putting a new date on the same letter, and I'm not trying to be flip about that, but I think maybe we have some further concerns, maybe that are actually further highlighted by this presentation tonight. So I would certainly support a letter from the board. I think it keeps parties on track as to expectations and concerns. So that makes sense, Syed.
So do you mind if we then forward those comments on to Chris? Can we send those, Christy, is that okay if we send you our, revised concerns, and then maybe you can summarize them again in another letter that, hey, the board of Selectmen of Westborough wants these, the next time you come around or whatever, we want these specific concerns that we have outlined answered specifically.
Yep, I think we get the point. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Syed. So with that being 7:20, I'm going to wrap this discussion up. I want to thank all the members of Eversource for being on our call tonight. I do, on behalf of the board, appreciate that you have come before us and presented the information that you did present. I hope that we While the conversation may be difficult to certainly hear, if I were in your seat, I think that having these conversations and working through them is the only way that potentially we come to a solution that works for the town of Westborough and Eversource. So keeping those lines of communication open with our chief, our public safety team, and our town manager and this board is critically important.
Thank you very much for having us.
You're welcome. Okay.
Thank you.
Stay safe, everyone.
Thank you very much. You too. Okay. So we are at our 6:50 agenda item, blown right through that timeline, but that's okay. I'm going to turn it over to Selectman Edinburgh and Selectman Emery for discussion on the committee handbook. Unless, excuse me, is there anything else on, we did have gas leaks. I know we just dismissed Eversource. Are we all set? I felt like we kind of discussed that. Good. I just, Chief Purcell needs to go. I don't want to.
Yeah, that was part of our conversation with Eversource, so they started with that.
Yep. Okay. I just want to make sure we're all good. I think we more than covered that. Okay.
Did you want to do the committee reappointments first?
No, I think
No, that's after.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Unless, yep. Nope. We're good. Let's go. Committee handbook.
Okay, so as the board is aware, Selectman Emery and I have been working to create a committee handbook, a guideline for committee operations that's intended to improve engagement and transparency in the way the various appointed boards and committees operate in town. We submitted a draft out to the board for comment. We haven't tonight. We'll be getting the feedback. We did open it up and publish it for public comment. We received several emails back with feedback and comments. The copy that was in the packet was the copy from May 5th. Also sent out, I believe on Friday, a version that shows all of the comments we've received to date in place in the document where they were suggested. The goal tonight is to receive feedback from and comments from the board itself. Selectman Emery and I afterwards will go back, we'll assimilate the comments, we'll make changes to the draft. A necessary and appropriate step will be to have town council review that draft, and then we'll come back to the board with what we believe is a final version for either approval or final comment and review before we, so we can wrap this process up, and then we can discuss the implementation plan and how we execute on the recommendations once we have the handbook in place.
Okay. Does anyone want to start? Yes. Yeah.
I mean, so I had a few things. I apologize for not sending them sooner, but I guess in reading through it, I guess I was a little surprised that when I was thinking we were doing a committee handbook, I was thinking it was about kind of the appointed committees, and was surprised to see that we were covering elected boards and committees along with kind of appointed committees. To me, it seemed like that got, even when I was reading through it, confused me sometimes, and things were overlapping and whatever. And I guess that was one thing. To me, I think it would be more useful as a committee handbook to be for, and what we were trying to address, I thought, was really those appointed committees and the rules around those appointed committees. So a lot of the elected stuff is within charters, bylaws, et cetera. And if we thought we wanted an elected board handbook, that to me would be a separate and distinct from, being in this committee handbook. One of the things that popped out to me, and I know we've talked about it on committees, but again, because we had elected in here, is we basically instituting term limits. So if you kept elected in here, you're basically saying that those elected bodies that it covers, which is not all elected bodies, are now subject to 2 consecutive terms as a term limit. And I guess that's a concern that I had. The other things I had were more minor. I think there was the section on meeting rooms that was there with, and I apologize if maybe this has been addressed. I didn't look back on the newer one, Alan, but it talks about contacts listed for meeting rooms, but I didn't see any contacts that were actually, it said they were going to be listed below, but I didn't see any contacts listed there. There was discussion in two sections, I think page 10 and page 27, about expenditure of funds. And so didn't know if that was repetitive or I was, again, having trouble connecting the two, but it seemed like it might be repetitive there. And then I guess the final one was where we have things that are, we talk about whether it's Mass General Law or some things about, kind of the rules, open meeting law, conflict of interest. I'm wondering whether we should just note those with a link as opposed to putting them in the handbook, because then every time they change, which we know they do, it causes an update to the handbook. So those are my comments. I mean, I should have started off. I mean, there's a lot of work here. Thank you, Alan and Lee, for the work that you've done. It's a lot of stuff. But I guess those were my comments, with the biggest one really being the committee versus appointed committee versus elected board.
Okay. So so with respect to elected versus appointed committees, we'll definitely go back and look, because obviously we can't impose term limits on elected bodies. In looking at other committee handbooks for other towns, they all cover both elected and appointed committees, and in part because in really, since this is the Board of Selectmen, the only elected committee this would cover would be ourselves, unless other elected boards like the planning board decided to adopt this or some other version of it, right? We can't control their policies and procedures. And so part of the goal is to say, yes, there's laws about open meeting and provision of information, but we're trying to acknowledge that those, given our current society and the way communications happen, that those laws don't necessarily provide for sufficient transparency. So things such as, even though open meeting law says you don't have to actually include supporting documentation with the minutes, it just has to be available upon request. This is saying, hey, when you produce your minutes, attach all the documents referred to in the minutes, so that people don't have to make that request for documents that are part of the public record. It's part of it. And so it's really about, even as an elected board, how we improve the access and speed of information and what we're doing. I mean, the classic challenge we face is we discuss an issue at a meeting, 2 weeks later, we might even approve the minutes of that meeting. At the same time, we might be then voting on that discussion from the prior meeting. And those minutes haven't been published yet. So we've lost the opportunity for people to be aware that something's being discussed and a vote is coming, simply because of the timing of the way the mechanics of agendas and minutes and postings and minute approval works. And so it's your comments about elected versus appointed definitely come into play. It's something, Lee, unless you object, I think we can take a step back and reconsider and look at as part of the next review. But that's sort of why they're there. Also, as an elected body, we are an appointing authority. And so we will have to be referred to in the document to a certain level. But Lee, I think I'm comfortable taking a step back and a second look at that aspect of the document.
I'm not adverse to taking a step back and looking at it. I think it's interesting that the very good examples we got from the other towns included everything. I think it's important that we do get questions. I'm sure you have in the past, Ian, as chair, from people on elected committees saying, what are we supposed to do? What are the guidelines? So I think they need the benefit of something. I'm not sure it's beneficial to have in a separate document, but I'm willing to look at that. And then the other thing is, it's my understanding that the Board of Selectmen are responsible for making sure that all of the entities in the town follow state rules, federal rules, charter rules, incorporation rules, that that we're responsible for that. So if we're responsible for that, and Christy can help me, understand that better, maybe council, aren't we responsible for giving them guidelines so they have something to follow? So I would want to look into that. It's not Christie's responsibility to make sure the planning board is following the rules. I think it's the Board of Selectmen's responsibility. And as an example. So those are my thoughts on that. But I'm very, very happy to re-examine it. And I wonder how the other board members feel about separating those things out, if they have the same feeling or not, Ian.
I'll hold my comments. Syed, did you want to comment?
I have nothing more to say.
In any comments, or specifically in response to what Ian was suggesting?
No comments.
Okay. I think it's interesting, Ian. You know what? I think that might have been part of my confusion when I was reading it, because I maybe there needs to be a specific section around elected committees, elected boards, committees, etc., where that makes sense. So I do think it's worth taking a look. Excuse me. I did submit comments, so I'm not going to repeat them here. You all can read that in the document. I did think that there was a missing component, and I've had some of those conversations with our general manager of Westborough TV around kind of how Westborough TV is part of, particularly now, of course, it's all the more highlighted with COVID, but how when a committee should be engaging Westborough TV to cover a meeting or not, and what is the role of Westborough TV. So I think whether we're in a pandemic or not, that's a conversation that I would encourage that, I'd love to have Karen Henderson take a look at the committee handbook and weigh in. And I think it leads to a broader conversation, even with you, Christy, around kind of what are the expectations of how, what meetings are being covered. Because typically it's just, it's been a handful of them. And I'm wondering if that needs to be expanded. And of course, that depends upon Westborough TV's bandwidth and, what the actual needs are. But I felt like there was a piece there that was missing. I also felt that in the committee handbook, I think we got to really understand the expectations around committees having websites or not having websites. Is every committee going to have a website? One of my other kind of pet peeves all along is that we have committees that where we have members listed, but they themselves there's not a direct point of contact for those individuals. And I'm not sure in version 1 we're going to resolve that, but I do think that's if you're I'm not sure we always want to point back to a general phone number, like, contact the town manager's office if you have a question. If someone has a question about, something going on with the committee, they should be able to reach out minimally to the chair. And I feel like that the chair should, have their information available for public consumption. Alan, you were going to add something?
So specific to that, we'll go back and clarify that every committee should have at least a web page, and there should be a mechanism for contacting the committee, which even if it's a, committee name at town.westborough.ma.us email, that the committee would receive so that they would be in the record and they could respond. So we can clarify that there's a minimum set of requirement, and then obviously consider, should every member of the committee also have a link that allows people to submit comments to them as individuals. So
yeah, and I think we need to really balance the, how many addresses does our IT department, how many should they really be maintaining, et cetera, and how many emails are, committees actually going to receive. So I think that needs to be explored, and not to get too deep in the weeds here, but how would a committee go about requesting, the Sustainable Westborough at, how do they actually do that? Does that go to the town manager? So those sort of steps need to be thought through and make sure that they're in the book. But I think, to echo what Ian has already said, I think that it's a great, necessary jumping off place, and you guys have done a great job. So thank you for doing that. And I want to thank the members of the public who were interested enough to provide their comments. So thank you very much. I think, like all things, we'll find that, as soon as we publish it and say we're okay to use it, it'll be like, we need a version 2, because we'll learn as we use it, but we have to start someplace. Yes, Ian.
Sorry, I just had one more, Shelby.
Yep.
I forgot to bring it up, was because there actually was a new one, and I think I understand it, but it definitely was a new kind of leadership position, which was kind of the immediate past chair nominating committee role in there. That's basically being required for all committees. So I guess to Lee and to Alan, just thinking about your thinking with that position. I'm not sure if that came from what things you saw in other towns, but it definitely is something that I think is, from my knowledge of committees we've had in town and boards, and it goes back to selected board, that is it a responsibility? Am I responsible right now for recruiting the next selectman as the past chair? Which so just was a question as well.
Yeah, I had that same question, Ian. That's a great one. And again, is it sort of more of a recommendation? Is it based on the experience of the chair? It's encouraged.
So this one's my fault, and I actually, pulled that in because in, I believe, every nonprofit I've ever been involved with volunteer boards, there is a role defined where, and it's usually the past chair, where you help recruit. And one of the issues that we've talked about, what we've talked about a number of times, is how do we get, a broader representation of the town onto committees, right? And, historically it's evolved into, we have committees, people are willing to be reappointed, we go ahead and reappoint, as opposed to having someone out there saying, hey, is there someone else interested? Should we not reappoint and appoint someone new? And that sort of gets into consecutive terms. And we can talk about whether that's hard and fast or not. But it also gets into saying, hey, and I guess you're right, it doesn't necessarily apply to elected committees, but committees that are appointed, having someone say, okay, I was the chair, part of my role in stepping off the chair is, who can we find in the community who may be interested in serving on this committee, who I could talk to about its role, responsibilities, and actively encourage and invite people to come in. And it's not because we even think current committee members aren't doing a good job. It's because having some turnover and having new ideas and new faces and new voices keeps committees and the work they're doing vibrant, and can help better reflect, the broader and changing demographic and needs of the town. So we'll go back. I think we can consider, is that a hard and fast rule? Is it elected versus appointed? Is it a suggestion? But trying to formalize the process that says, you know what, hey, if no one comes forward, we're just going to reappoint everyone, and change it to say, okay, look, we should be actively seeking new voices and finding a time when they can join these committees and take a turn at the helm.
And Ian, to your point, it's a very good point. might have surprised people a lot, but I think we have to remember that we as a board can decide, no, we don't want that suggestion on there. We don't want that to be a policy, along with just looking at, how have we written each of the things that we think should be in there. Are there some things in there that you don't think we should be suggesting?
Yeah, I think it's that one to me felt more like it should be suggested guidance versus a requirement of a committee. And Alan, I think, kind of that narrative around it, here's why we're suggesting it. That it's important for the health of the committee, et cetera, but not a requirement. Because, oftentimes, as we've seen, I'm winking with, our, past chairs, they just want to step down and say, woof, I'm done with that for a bit. Just kidding.
No, I can understand that.
No, you're not, and it's true.
No, it's a lot of work, right? So,
yes,
So, but we also, it's also a way to engage, the former chair, right, to kind of re-engage them in a different way. So, I guess, Alan and Lee, any other comments after you've heard comments from the board here, or Christy, if you want to weigh in? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to exclude you.
No, I had provided comments to Alan, and I'd also worked with Leah on comments specifically around budgets and expending funds. I think probably once Alan and Lee have had a chance to incorporate some of your comments, I think the review by town council will answer a lot of the questions that were raised tonight.
And also, Christy, correct me if I'm wrong, but the draft was presented to all of the department heads?
Maybe I'd have to check going back if
Okay.
ever that one. I think so. I know all the committee. I'd have to go back and check to see if it was specifically, but I know it went out to all the committees, boards and committees. So.
Okay. So, because one of the questions that obviously comes up, and this came up in the staffing study, is the law of unintended consequences. Every board or committee or subcommittee we create at some point is going to request work from department heads and staff. And so if there's anything in the guidelines that department heads feel should be included, or anything in here that they think might unduly burden them, we'd want to take that into consideration.
Yep. Yeah. So I think if you're okay with it, I think it, I'll check back and see if they already got it. But I think after town council has looked at it,
that's fine. Just at some point in the process.
Helpful, because they might have feedback that the department heads would also have. So.
That sounds good to me.
I'm wondering if we should have, and maybe this is already version 2, but or it's an appendix, but some of the committees don't necessarily, the descriptions of committees are not always clear and known, and the purpose of them. Should those be referenced in the handbook or as an extension of this process, as each committee has its own website, that is undertaken so that it's clear as to the mission and purpose? I know the committee says that each committee is required to define that, and it might be defined by charter or bylaw, or the purpose if it's like an ad hoc committee. But I think we just need to make sure that, okay, we've got a committee. Does everyone understand what the committee's purpose is? Sustainable Westborough is a great one where, you go out to the website, it's very detailed. There are other committees where it may not be quite as clear as to what the role is. So I just put that out there for feedback. Consideration.
I wonder, so the appointing authority would typically set up what the purpose of the committee is, which most of the committees that we're talking about are appointed by this board.
Mm-hmm.
One of the staffing study recommendations being to look at the missions of all the committees. I think that's probably where we would find a clearer.
Good point, Christy. Yep. Excellent. Great. Lee and Alan, anything else you wanted to add to close this out?
No, just thank everyone for reading and the thoughtful feedback. And Lee, we have some more work to do, which is a good thing.
So, and we'll try to turn it around as quickly as we can, because it's taking a while. We don't want it to take any longer than it has to.
Yep. Oh. We've had a few things get in the way. So, okay, great. Thank you very much. So we'll move on to our next agenda item, which is annual reappointments to town boards and committees. Christy?
So these are just more annual reappointments. So we have, let's pull it up. Oh, sorry, I lost it.
Okay. I can take it if you're.
Yeah,
we have. That's okay. No worries. So we have Joan Pavolis is up for a reappointment to the Housing Partnership Committee for a term ending June 30, 2023, and Sue Abladian is a member of the Cultural Council, is seeking reappointment, and her term would end June 30, 2023.
I would move to appoint Joan reappoint Joan Pavolis to the Housing Partnership Committee for a term ending June 30th, 2023, and also move to appoint Sue Blading to the Cultural Council for a term ending June 30th, 2023.
I second both of those motions.
Okay. Any comments or discussion? Seeing none, we'll go to a vote. Selectman Johnson.
Johnson, yes.
Selectman Hashmi.
Yes.
Selectman Emery.
Yes.
Selectman Edinburgh.
Yes.
And Selectman Marshall, yes. 5-0-0. 5 being present. Great. We're already making up time. Okay, so we are moving now to discussion vote for request of the board to sign a petition in support of generating new revenue. Selectman Hashmi?
Yeah, so actually I want to just change it a little bit. One of the things, so thank you, Madam Chair. I think most of you have gotten the letter that I had sent, and this comes from the fact that something that the board had done, I believe at the urging of Selectman Edinburgh and the school committee, basically reaching out saying that we need, further funding for our schools. But it's not just and I had raised at that point that it's not just a question of further fund, not just our schools need further funds, but our towns need further funds. And this is happening, in quote unquote, we're being told that this is happening in the time of a budget crunch, that their state revenues are falling off. So and you don't need to, what I want to make clear is what I had sent to the board via Shelby and Christie is that we don't need to agree to all of those terms, but all the suggestions that are there for raising additional revenue, what I wanted to get across to the board is that the discussion that we are hearing in the news and elsewhere is that there aren't any revenues that are available to fund towns or schools or whatever. And what I wanted you to understand from reading what I had sent you is that there are other sources of revenue. And what I'm hoping that the board will consider is that sending a letter just simply stating to our delegation that we recognize things are tight in our state, but because there are critical needs that remain unmet, that we consider that you look at additional sources of revenue. And then let the legislature, the letter that I sent you was very, very specific. I recognize some of you may or may not be in favor of certain things, but if you make it more generic, then at least there is recognition that at least this should be part of the discussion. I'll give you just a small example of this. As you are aware, several years ago, Westborough had passed a resolution or at town meeting saying, hey, we want to have a local excise tax on gas. That has gone absolutely nowhere. In the current budget scenario, that is still not part of the things that have been suggested. But we do need something for our roads. We have infrastructure things that we need to repair. So I'll stop there if you have any questions.
Yes, Ian.
Selectman Hashmi, thank you for your comments there, because and how do you phrase that? Because the letter that was there, I wasn't supportive of, but I do understand what you're getting at.
Yeah, the letter is very, sorry, Ian, please go ahead.
Nope. So yeah, I'm supportive of sending stuff. I mean, I think, as you said, we've seen it on the school side. I think we could craft or ask, Christy to craft something for us. I would say to me, it's not just revenues either. It's just looking at basically the allocations within existing revenues to cities and towns. Something we've talked about a lot in terms of our Chapter 90 money, that going from 200 to 300 million is something that we've requested, and a lot of towns in the MMA I think have done that. So I think to me it's not just about, we talk new sources of revenue. It's not about new taxes and things like that, but it's also just.
No, absolutely not. It's just, sorry, go ahead. Yeah, it's just like looking at, just thinking broadly, having that discussion and doing something about it. Thank you.
Yeah, no, and I think you're spot on. It's about, I mean, we seem to get the short end of the straw on a lot of things, and I think it's just reiterating that, cities and towns are in the need. And I think some of the stuff that was in that letter, yeah, that there are things that, you know, restrict us in terms of what we can do. So we need their help. But so I guess to Syed's point, I would be supportive if other board members were of putting, you know, kind of a more general type letter to them as they are going or will be going through their budget process to not forget about us.
Syed, I didn't see the letter in the Dropbox. I may have missed it, or was it sent in a different way and I just missed it because of that?
I think it's in the packet, right? Am I
Yeah,
not right?
it is in the packet, Lee. It's after the committee handbook, and it starts with a copy of an email.
So is it slightly out of sync there? I'm sorry,
It's on page 93. That's okay. It's on page 93.
Well, I'd be supportive of Ian's suggestion anyway, and I will go back and review it, but I don't have to right this minute. Thank you.
So, you know, I definitely agree that we should be advocating for full and appropriate funding from the state and to avoid cuts and restrictions in local aid and to give us more flexibility. The resolution in support of what the school committee was asking was actually fairly specific. It was about COVID-related costs and unfunded mandates related to response to the pandemic. And so it was asking for a very specific action and coverage of not identifying individual expenses, a very specific thing. You know, I think for us to say, you know, in a general letter, hey, we need more money from the state. We don't want to, you know, get creative. I'm not sure that helps move the discussion forward. To have a general letter that just says, hey, we need more revenue. I think our representatives know that. They do work hard. I know there are discussions on Beacon Hill about funding and the loss of revenue to cities and towns, as well as at the state level, and how that can be made up. And so I think if we're going to send a letter to our House of our representatives and our state senator asking them to take action, that we actually have to be asking them to take an action or a type of action that we don't believe they're already doing. And so I guess I'd be interested in hearing Selectman Hashmi's thoughts on what those would be. You know.
Well, first, I'm more interested in. So here's where I'm coming from. I actually am supportive of many of the things that the initial things said, but I was deeply concerned that many of the board, you know, and would not be in favor of the specific things that are outlined. But one of the things I'm interested in is, for instance, looking at additional ways of raising revenues for our transportation infrastructure. Now, does that mean that, and also supportive of allowing towns to look at mechanisms of what happens frequently in town is that, as you're aware, we have to, you know, because of home rules and regulations, we frequently have to ask to go to the legislature to get approval. And because of that, those things go nowhere. Our gas, the thing that we had talked about, just increasing what we are charging in gas so that we can use it to fund our roads, our infrastructure, that has gone nowhere. So I hear what you're saying, you know, but I was concerned, like I said, I was concerned if we use the specific language of the letter that I shared with you, I would not get the support of the board. But I do feel that if we at least commit to them that, look, we are interested in you being creative and we're looking for you for your leadership. I don't think that is not a bad thing to send. I don't think that is a bad thing. I think it puts the pressure on them to say, hey, we are looking for you for your leadership to find ways. And whether it is allocation, maybe it isn't. And quite honestly, maybe it doesn't have to be. There are findings that you could cut things in, for instance, in drug costs. That could save, if you cut your the costs in medicines, for instance, in insulin that the state Medicaid pays, that could save you money. So there are all those avenues that are available as long as the legislature commits to them. And what we're asking, or sorry, I should say, I'm asking, is for the state legislator to commit to raising or looking at ways so that we are not at the short end of the stick. And I would just remind you that since and I don't want to take too much time, but since the Great Recession of 2008, we have not recovered our level of funding that we had since then. And as a result, our property tax owners are constantly being asked to give money, to fund our operations. That is going to be much more difficult ask if the recession continues.
Go ahead, Alan. No, go ahead, Alan, and then Lee, please.
And I understand that, and I don't disagree that we want our legislators to be creative and do leadership role. I guess my point is, if the ask is basically, hey, do your job, then they're going to receive this and to say, we're already doing that. So if we want, it's always easy to say, hey, there's a problem, you fix it, right? It's harder, and it takes more effort for us to say, hey, there's a problem, I see a problem, and here are ideas that we believe as a board can help Westborough address our problem and help the state in a broader context help theirs. So if it's, hey, we want to have the option for gas excise tax, and we won't argue the merits of that here and now, then we should say in the letter, such as, streamlining home rule petition process, or, us reinitiating that effort to get that home rule petition through the legislature, and ask for our representatives' help in ushering it through the committees. That's a specific ask that they can act on, where they're not going to feel they're already doing. And yes, it can increase pressure, but if we want results, if we want things to change, then there is some responsibility on us to say, what do we want them to consider, and what do those changes want to be? And my concern with the petition as presented wasn't even necessarily the four ideas that petition asked for. It's that there was no context to say, if we do X, it'll have this impact on state funding and the amount of money available for local towns, or even, on something like raising tax rates on long-term capital gains and dividends, not even a proposal of how much it should go up, or a range, or a discussion of understanding that, yes, large corporations could probably absorb it, but, hey, my acquaintance who's unemployed, who's selling investments to pay for his mortgage, you increase the capital gains tax, you're pulling money out of his pocket that he's using to live on, right? So I really believe that if we want to craft something, that it can't just be, hey, you have a problem, or there's a problem. It has to include some action item that we want the legislatures to do.
Thank you, Alan. Lee?
Hi, I just wanted to clarify something. I agree with what Alan's saying. I was looking for a letter that Syed had composed. I did see the letter in our packet. So, it's quite a long letter. It's a little hard to miss. So I was confused. I was looking for something that Syed had produced.
Thank you. Thank you. Ian?
Yeah, Alan, thank you for that. I do agree. And I think there's a lot of things, but I think that would require time as us as a board in terms of some of the things that, home rule or those types of things that I'm personally don't have them off the, tip of my tongue right now. But I guess what I'm wondering is, and what I was thinking is a letter that says, and potentially it could be something that says we would request. So I think the start of the letter that was in there that Syed included, talked about the hits to cities and towns. I think they know about that, but perhaps the request at this point is that they hold, that our request is that they hold funding for cities and towns at least level to fiscal year 2020 numbers. and that goes back to the point whether it's additional revenues or it's reallocating stuff. I mean, that would be, I think, helpful for the town. And we've already, through our budget, discounted, what we thought we were going to get. But I think going in and requesting that doesn't happen would be personally helpful to Westborough if we were to get just, level funded from the prior year. The other one I threw out there, and it's one we've continually asked for, it never comes through, but is the Chapter 90 funding going from the 200 million to 300 million. I believe that's something MMA has pushed for and others. But I mean, those are just two examples. But I think you're right, Alan. If we were artisan something, just to, hey, think about us is going to go nowhere. It's just a kind of a waste of our time. So thank you for bringing that up, because I do agree with you.
So I think that what we can't send in is don't forget about Westborough, we're out here type of letter.
Right.
Right, and I think that's not to put words in Alan's mouth, but I think that's correct. We're going to be much more effective if we have specific ideas that we want our legislators' support with. Then we should discuss those as a board at a different time, and then bring those forward. In the absence of that, I would be fully supportive of Ian's idea to have a letter that talks about level funding and reiterates the Chapter 90. I think that's very specific. I think it's pretty straightforward. Because although I'll go on record and saying I'm not sure it's going to matter, I think the state is going to do what the state is going to do regardless of the letter from the board. And I hate to be pessimistic, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't advocate on behalf of the town in at least asking for their support to push that message forward.
So would we be agreeable to say that, to kind of echo what Ian says, that the assessment on our city and our school be capped at least the fiscal 2020 level? We can all agree on that, yes? Yes?
Yep.
That's what Ian would you be okay?
I would hear what Christy had to say too.
I think it might be helpful if you just provide me with the things that you think should go into the letter, because I think it's easier for the board to respond to a draft of that letter.
Okay, so would that be emailing the board, or because I don't want to break open meeting laws, so should I send an email to the board or just send it to you so you can disseminate it to the board?
Well, you would just send it to me, and then I would take your comments as well as others and draft a letter.
Okay. All right, I'll get that to you then. Would that be okay with the board? And
Yep.
I'll just work with what Ian has said about, level funding, at least level funding, and go from there. And then potentially if the board wants to add some other.
Yeah,
language.
we can add our thoughts in if there
Okay,
are specifics.
thank you very much.
Yep.
I'll get that to Christy.
Okay, great. Okay, we are, just for the public's benefit, we are not talking about agenda item number 11 tonight. So we're moving on to 12, which is to discussion vote regarding the Central Massachusetts Regional Stormwater Coalition. Christy?
So this is a coalition that we have been a part of for the last 5 years. It's basically working with about 30 other communities on stormwater related issues. It's something that the DPW feels strongly about continuing. They've actually significantly decreased our dues in this year. And you also had in your packet a list of all the things that they worked on last year. But in general, it gives our DPW access to trainings and information, sort of lessons learned in working with other towns, and something that we wish to continue for the next 5 years.
Great. Is there a motion?
Sure.
Yes, go ahead, Ian. Talking on mute here.
Yeah, I'll move to approve and execute the intermunicipal agreement for participation in the Central Massachusetts Regional Stormwater Coalition for fiscal years 2021 through fiscal year 2025.
I second that.
I second.
Sorry.
Everyone second.
Okay, so Ann, and I think I heard Syed. And just for the public's benefit, Christy, I'm just trying to scroll to it. The contract is with the town of Spencer, and it is for $1,000.
Yep, $1,000 this year.
$1,000 annually. Yep. Okay. Okay. Any discussion, comments, questions? Seeing none. Selectman Emery.
Yes.
Selectman Johnson.
Johnson, yes.
Selectman Edinburgh.
Edinburgh, yes.
Selectman Hashmi.
Yes.
And Selectman Marshall, yes. 500. Great. Okay. Moving on to our next agenda item, which is discussion vote to. Oh,
Sorry, I just wanted to remind the board that you would need to sign this, so we'll leave that out also for your signature.
okay. Great. So maybe do that tomorrow. Okay. Thank you. So Christy, Community Preservation Act and amending the membership of that committee.
Yeah, so I had been talking to Jim Robbins. We talked about the Community Preservation Act committees that had been established by the town before. I'm sure Lee is very aware of them. But he had noted that typically in the past there had been a planning board member on the Community Preservation Act committee. Currently, we do not have a planning board member listed. We do have 3 residents. So my recommendation in your packet was to have a planning board member and 2 residents. But then in talking to both Jim Robbins and Mark Silverberg, there was discussion about the potential overlap of people who are members of the committees that we identified. So that's recreation, affordable housing, historic commission, open space. What my recommendation now would be is that it would be a planning board member or a resident, and that would be if a planning board member is taking on a different role. So if we have someone who's on open space and planning board, then we wouldn't specifically have a planning board representative.
So just so I understand, Christy, so for example, if, as you said, an open space rep that is also a planning board member, that was the open space rep, then we wouldn't put another planning board member. They would kind of fill both there. So that would get us still 3 residents.
Right.
Okay. Makes sense.
And I do have a related question because seat 4 is Affordable Housing / Housing Partnership Committee. I'm wondering if Gary and I need to arm wrestle for that spot. So I just assume I'll coordinate with him to.
I think it's intended to be either or.
Okay.
Right, so the intent was to have someone representing affordable housing and
Okay.
multiple committees. So
Okay. Then we'll coordinate and make sure that whoever that is will liaison with both of our committees.
So, but for that same example, then just to be clear, Lee, I don't know if you know you were voluntold for this.
I've done like 2 3-ring binders on this already.
Okay. No, I don't know if we caught you up on that. So being that Lee is the selectman who's been appointed here, so for affordable housing, for example, that couldn't be Alan because we already have a selectman's representative. Is that correct?
No.
I'm just trying to understand if we just talked about the planning board piece, how is that different than this?
It's not different. I mean, we typically have, if we have people who serve on multiple committees and each one has a representative, then that can happen. But in talking to both the town planner and the chair of the planning board, they felt comfortable with this approach, understanding that the planning board might already be represented by one of the other committees. So
I don't think we don't have very many people on the housing committee, and Alan does that so well that having him represent that.
I just want to understand in case they say, Alan, we want you to be our representative on this. I just didn't want that to be an issue.
I mean, it couldn't be a majority of the board.
Okay.
Well, I mean, in looking at what we have there today, I could see a relatively likely scenario that we could have 2 planning board members that are on this committee, but coming from a different, not with a planning board, but from one of these other memberships.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
So I'd be fine. I mean, I'd be fine. I think Alan's suggestion of them figuring it out, if it's Alan, I think that's fine, as long as we don't have a third member of the Board of Selectmen on that committee.
Okay, so should there be, again, I'm just looking for clarification. Do we need to be clear that no more than, do we need to clarify the language that's here?
I think what it was that, so number 7, it would be, I think it was planning board or resident. And then, so it's almost 7 would be 2 residents, or 7 could be a planning board member or
2 residents.
Resident or resident. And number 8 then would be 2 residents.
Okay.
So once we have the makeup of the committee, we would know how president spaces are advertised. Once we have the representatives from each of the committees.
Okay, so number 7 would be one member of the planning board and 2 residents, or if the planning board is otherwise represented on another committee, then it would be 3 residents.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So moved.
Sorry.
I'll second that.
Good.
Okay, all right. Any further discussion or questions? Okay, seeing none, we have motion by myself. Selectman Emery,
Yes.
Selectman Johnson,
Johnson, yes.
Selectman Hashmi,
Yes.
Selectman Edinburgh,
Yes.
and Selectman Marshall, yes, 500. Great. Okay. Excellent. Okay, town manager report, Christy. And just folks, she sent that out to us. It was separate from our packet, but it was in your email.
So we're still working on the reopening. We weren't able to obtain all of the plexiglass shields that we needed. So we pushed that out a few weeks, but we're still working in sync with the library so that we'll open at the same time.
Say
it. Yeah, I'm sure you've already got this thought out, but I'm concerned about the uptick in cases that have happened. I know we've only had a short increase, but across the state there is some concern. So just I guess I know you're already thinking about this, but just be so and careful.
Yeah, so we're waiting to make sure that we have all of the proper shields. We have stanchions that we're setting up to limit access to the majority of the building. No public restrooms will be available. We're gonna have markings on the floor so that people are socially distanced. And our initial opening would just be for limited hours during the week. So that's where we plan to start.
Christy, can I ask just a question about that? It must be my thing with restrooms. I realize that there's a maintenance and a cleaning aspect of that, but I had the same issue when the golf course was reopening. I'm like, how do you open a golf course without making restrooms available to golfers? I'm not sure how we open a public building and not allow people to use the facilities. I mean, again, I know that it's supposed to be limited interaction and they're not going to be roaming through the buildings, but I have concerns with that. So I'll take it under for what it's worth. I just have concerns with that. Maybe not all bathrooms are open to the public, but maybe only certain ones are. I don't know.
I mean, it's different obviously than a golf course because you're coming in to pay a bill or, get a notarized document. And so it's
yeah, I mean, I realize the amount of time is less. Right. I just would ask that be considered because there there are a lot of people that do things online and won't ever go into town hall, but the folks that I see moving in and out of town hall, may need to use the facilities while they're there.
I agree. It's a concern, I think.
Yeah. So
are there state guidelines on that or CDC guidelines on that, Christy? That's why you decided to close them?
We're trying to do we're trying to do a very limited reopening and reduce access to the majority of the building. We've actually positioned desks in a way that someone wouldn't need to go all the way to the back of the building to the Board of Health Department to purchase a dump sticker. We have a desk where someone will be set up to do that right in the front of the building. So we're really just trying to limit access as we slowly reopen. So that's really our thinking.
Well, I think if it's posted on the, right on the front, I would imagine some of those signs up front will need to be, changed. You've probably already thought of that, but just please monitor it. If folks are, if that becomes an issue, please be aware of that. That's all. Thanks.
Okay. Related to the golf course, as the board's aware, the current golf pros contract expires at the end of the calendar year. So myself, Kim Foster, Jen Kirkland, Selectman Johnson have met with members of the Country Club Operating Committee to discuss moving forward. We actually have another meeting scheduled for next week, and we expect that the committee will make a presentation to the board at an upcoming meeting. We did receive a final report of the staffing study, which I emailed out to the board today. This also has been posted to the website. I've sent it out to the department heads to receive feedback on their specific departmental recommendations. And then I'll take their feedback and provide a memo to the board with my implementation recommendations at your first meeting in September. The capital plan, this is something that we've been working on since last year, except for when COVID hit, related to improving the capital plan process and making sure that we're including all capital projects and capital items. And so we're going to be meeting with the finance team next week to present the proposed changes to that process, and we'll present it to the Board of Selectmen at your August meeting, and certainly seek feedback from the Advisory Finance Committee. The Department of Public Works is kicking off the Complete Streets process, so there's a meeting this week. There's a link on the website. There's also an announcement on the town's homepage. So they're working on that. This week's meeting will be the first of 2 meetings to draft the prioritization list over the next couple months. Information technology, we talked about this before, the fact that we had an issue with the website migration, and those issues have since been corrected. Youth and Family Services, they continue to have their interface referral system. So they've received 43 referrals during the second half of the contract year. They also continue to address the needs of residents related to COVID-19, particularly calls for a COVID information line, which is still out there and available for people. They also said farewell to a longtime adult member and welcome 2 new student members in June and July. And they're currently seeking applicants to replace the adult member. And then Kara is also the chairperson of the Town's Diversity and Inclusion Committee, which started meeting again in June, and they're working on filling the vacancies. So we had talked about that previously. They're going to be interviewing people who are interested, and I'll appoint after those interviews. The Finance Department, they've mailed out their fiscal year 2021 exemption applications, which is an annual process. The applications are available. They're also available on the assessor's website or by calling the office directly. People can mail it. The office can mail out an application, and applications can be returned by mail or left in the drop box in the front of town hall. Obviously, because we haven't reopened yet, exemption applications are not due until April 1st, 2021. The Regal Theater, the town recently participated in a hearing on this case with legal counsel. The next steps in the process is publication of interested parties and delivery of citations issued by the court by certified mail and publication. The court has not yet authorized us to move forward with this, but the town's tax title attorney understands the significance of this property and is advising us moving forward.
What does this mean in English?
It just means we're going through the process. We have to publicize with interested parties because there's no identified owner.
So I'm sorry. So when it says to allow these entities and send out citations, who are these entities?
It's any entities that might have an interest, and so they've been identified through this process with council and the courts.
Okay, so they're looking, in a sense, this is, I'm sorry to be dense, but this is them making sure there are no owners out there, right? That's kind of what it's getting at?
Yeah.
Okay,
So
thank you.
it's really what we did before, but now it's being done through the court in this manner.
Yep.
So the court is just saying, doing its due diligence, right? Am I getting?
Exactly. It's just part of the due diligence process.
Okay, thank you.
And then the Board of Health takes the lead on the Abandoned Properties Initiative, which obviously has been stalled since with COVID. But they've referred to properties to the Attorney General's Abandoned Houses program, and they'll, as COVID work winds down, they'll be working back with the Attorney General's office to keep that program going. And that's all I have.
Great, thank you very much, Christy. All right, issues and correspondence. We will start with Ian.
I'll make it easy. I have nothing this evening.
Okay, thank you. Alan.
Okay, just one quick item. The Affordable Housing Trust Working Group had its first meeting a week, 2 Fridays prior. Had a good kickoff meeting. The efforts have been divided into 3 focus points. One is the governance of the trust, which will really be the legal structure of the trust, how appointments are made, how changes could be made, things of that nature. The second is operations, which will be the mission, the priorities and the guiding principles that the trust will follow. And the third is community engagement, which is both education of the community about trusts and what the trust might do, as well as getting feedback on needs. As part of the operation, we're doing a pretty detailed data analysis on demographics and expectations of the town, so we can project affordable housing needs into the future and let that guide some of the decision process going forward. In addition to the appointed members of the board, we've had a couple of community members volunteer to sit in on the meetings and help with various tasks of the board, and certainly we welcome the extra hands because there's a lot of work to do between now and when special fall town meeting occurs. So I want to thank the community for their support in this effort.
Excellent. Exciting to see that up and sort of like we have liftoff, right?
Yes.
That's great. Very exciting. Syed.
I have several quick things.
Yep.
I'm just continue to be concerned about can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, so I'm continue to be, this is now the several years into our drought. And since we are also stewards of our land and we have committed to being sustainable, I'm just wondering on our various, and this includes the golf courses and our various fields, how much water are we using a day? I mean, is it a few hundred or thousands of gallons per day? It would at some point, and I don't know if this is something that Sustainable Westborough should be doing, but I would think as a board we should be looking at this data. And should we be using less? The other thing, and again, I'd say this because again, we're part of looking at being sustainable. Part of our goal is to protect the environment. Is we should be looking to see if we can cut back on our water usage. And I'll just point the finger at myself. I have a green lawn, and the question is, how long am I going to be able to afford to have a green lawn? I recognize this is New England, but is that something that we should be looking at? So I just raise that for you to think about and maybe potentially consider doing something about. The other thing I would raise to the board is, especially now as we are discussing, and I don't know if this is more as we're discussing school reopening, and since several of you are involved with the COVID-19 task force, and since there may be a continued need for online learning, is there a discounted plan that is available to our residents from the various internet providers that are out there? And if there isn't, can we marshal the resources of the town to get that plan for our residents, or especially our low-income residents? So I would just, suggest that to you. And
Excuse
then
me, Madam Chair?
Yeah, Syed,
go ahead.
Alan has a response to that.
Oh, good.
If you'd
Okay.
like.
Just to that point, the school department's on top of it.
Okay.
When the district went full remote in the spring, they did identify several, I don't know the exact number, but quite a few families that didn't have adequate service. And the district not only reached out to the internet service providers in town for long-term solutions that were cost effective, but actually provided those families with devices and access so that
Okay,
they're definitely on top of it over there.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, and Syed, I think, and Alan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that the funding for that was provided through the Education Foundation.
Oh, wonderful.
The access for those hotspots.
Oh, perfect. Just one more second, Shelby. So that we're protected for another year, yes, or whatever?
My understanding is all of those families have had the bandwidth needs met, that they could participate in full-time remote learning if needed.
Okay, all right. And then usually I have serious stuff, but today I'm just going to end with something happy. Tomorrow will be Bill Henderson's 100th birthday. I want to thank the board, who I believe most of them have signed a letter. And the only reason I mentioned that Mr. Henderson's the fact that he has not just passed a landmark, but that he has had a life which has touched and transformed other lives. And that is a legacy that I think all of us could aspire to. So it's a day early, but happy birthday, Mr. Henderson. I will personally deliver your letter from the board to you tomorrow if you're watching.
I'm sure he's watching, because that's how I'd celebrate my birthday if I were about to turn 100, by watching us.
Yeah, exactly. The day before. But thank you to the board.
People do that to fall asleep, but
yeah. But thank you to Stila and to the board for signing that letter. I will get that to him tomorrow.
Great. All right, back just in time. Lee, do you have any issues for issues and correspondence?
No, I don't, because I've been kind of behind, given my circumstances. I'm glad you've all been patient with me, and I hope that I will be back 100% on all my committees and my responsibilities. It's so much fun to be back to this 3-hour meeting.
Of course it is.
But you've managed it very well, Shelby. I really appreciate your new leadership.
Oh, well, thank you. And it's great to have you back, and glad you're doing well. So I'll make my issues and correspondence very brief. First of all, I want to take the time to thank Westborough TV, as always, for covering us tonight and bringing our meeting to the public. I want to again reiterate and thank Dr. Vaver for his thoughtful presentation. I truly feel enlightened every time I talk with him, and I learn something new, or I have an opportunity to think about something in a different way. And I hope that regardless of your views on the town seal, but it gives you pause to think. And I think sometimes we all need to do more thinking than talking. So I would encourage everyone to continue to wear your masks and wash your hands. We talk a lot about masks, but maybe not washing our hands. Please continue to do that. Then on a related note, just a quick update on the task force. We are continuing to meet. We're working on the concept of a town website, including a job board. Kim Foster is taking the lead to kind of explore what options are out there. And the concept, again, I may have mentioned this at our last meeting, but is that local businesses would have an opportunity on the town's website to post if they are hiring for folks, and it would just be a central landing page, and then it would direct someone to wherever that business wanted to send them to apply for that job. So the town isn't specifically endorsing any one company or what have you, but in light of the pandemic and in an effort to get people sort of back and acclimated and to help the economy and to help in families. That was an idea that came up. So we're working on that. With respect to the food pantry, that was a big area of discussion for a long time. The pantry has not been sort of maybe as busy as was expected as it's reopened. They are operating under normal business hours. And those families that have been receiving gift cards, they're recipients of gift cards. Phil Kittredge expected, I think, more people to come in and now start sort of shopping, and we haven't seen that. He hasn't seen that uptick. So there's continued outreach to Youth and Family Services and our school department to make sure that we're not missing families and that they understand kind of that it's open for them to go. And the senior center is running 2 buses on the road on Thursdays, lots of use for appointments and shopping and all of that. So that support continues. And we did confirm that they have plenty of volunteers for shopping, because I know folks are always like, how can I help? But plenty of volunteers, but appreciated the offer for support and help. And the other piece that was discussed at length is that real concern around rent payments and folks falling behind in rent, and that is a real concern for the groups that see that on a regular basis, folks from the Kirkside Foundation or St. Luke's or Youth and Family Services. So if folks are interested in helping out, the Westborough Community COVID-19 Fund is still there and willing to accept a donation. Every little bit helps. So I would encourage you to think about that as you think about how you might help your fellow community member. So with that, I will take a motion for executive session. We will not return to public session.
Yeah, I move that we enter into an executive session under Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A6, to discuss the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real estate, specifically 31 to 33 Eli Whitney Street and 30 Belknap Street.
Second that motion.
Okay, thank you, Lee. Roll call vote. Selectman Emery?
Emery, yes.
Selectman Hashmi?
Yes.
Selectman Johnson?
Johnson, yes.
Selectman Edinburgh?
Yes.
And Selectman Marshall, yes. We are adjourned and in executive session. Oh,
So do we
call
have
into
to
the
go to
new
a
number.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Alan, you put it, you emailed it, so I'll get it right on the top of my email. Thank you very much.
Great. All right. We'll see you in executive session. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.